took a quick shower, and there was still a trace of barely visible fatigue in the corners of his eyes. Without waiting for Gong Yi to speak, Huami in the ward hurriedly said, "Did you hear everything? City D has been flooded by a wave of zombies. Judging from the trend of this wave of zombies, they are heading towards our Xiangqing base." Gong Yi walked into the ward, put his hands on Huami's shoulders, and squeezed them gently. Then he placed his hands on Huami's bulging belly. Because her belly was so big, Huami wore a loose maternity dress that did not tighten her waist, and a thin sweater on the outside. Her whole temperament looked much softer than before. "I also gained a lot of weight." Just when Gong Yi's hand was on Huami's belly, the two little ones in Mommy's belly started moving again. They seemed to know that Dad was coming, and were very happy. Huami frowned slightly, looked at Gong Yi, and waited for Gong Yi's answer. She couldn't leave the rescue center for the time being because, given her condition, she could give birth at any time and anywhere. However, there is no city wall in the north, only an electric grid. If the zombies from City D gather in Xiangqing, the north of Xiangqing will not be able to hold out for long. According to the speed of the zombie tide, it will not take long to get from City D to Xiangqing. Within 2 days, the zombie tide will soon reach the north of Xiangqing. Gong Yi nodded and helped Huami back to bed. "I will gather people to Xiangqing North right now. Don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you three." Gong Yi guards the Xiangqing base and also guards all the survivors in the Xiangqing base. He also knows that his wife and 2 children are in this base. So even if it cost her life, she would not let the zombies in the north rush into the Xiangqing base. Huami took a deep breath. The bigger her belly got, the more she panted. The baby in her belly suppressed her breathing, making her sound particularly tired every time she spoke. "Go ahead. Don't worry about us. The walls on the south and east are very strong. It's impossible for zombies to break through such strong walls and enter the Xiangqing base. I have now transferred all the people who were repairing the city wall to the west. As long as we defend the zombies in the north and south, the western wall will be built soon. The zombies on the east and west sides all came from the south. Because there are too many zombies in the south and too few zombies have been killed, the zombies will gradually spread to the east and west in order to find a breakthrough. Today, the east city wall is built very solidly and is a little higher than the south city wall. There are several protective electric fences outside. It has become an existence that is almost impossible to break through. Therefore, Gong Yi guards the north, and Huami can concentrate on building the west. As long as she is given enough time, she will be able to complete the construction of the western wall." Beside the bed, Gong Yi bent down and hugged Huami. He suddenly kissed Huami on the lips. While Huami was stunned, Gong Yi had a soft expression and rubbed Huami's head with one hand. "Don't overwork yourself. If anything happens, call me in time. In case." Gong Yi did not say the rest of the words. He paused and said, "Find a safe place and live well with your child. The current situation is already critical enough, even though Gong Yi is the #1 psychic in the apocalypse. He was not even sure that he could continue to protect the Xiangqing base. After all, too many people died in the apocalypse. I discovered 2 days ago that my anxiety disorder had recurred. I woke up in the middle of the night and pulled my hair and then couldn't sleep the whole night. I had experience with this situation before, and I quickly found the cause of my anxiety, which was Xiaoming studies. I decided not to help Xiaoming with her homework anymore, for the sake of my life and our parent-child relationship. Faced with internal and external troubles, at this moment, Gong Yi just wants to be selfish for once. If everyone in the world is destined to die, he hopes to give the only 3 chances of survival to his wife and 2 children. He believed that with Huami's abilities, she would be able to find a safe place and live well with her child. So, Gong Yi just wanted to tell Huami that when the critical moment really came, Huami should not have any hesitation. Don't even think about saving him. She just took care of the children, kept herself safe, and protected their children. After giving the instructions, Gong Yi stood up and was about to leave. Huami, lying on the hospital bed, reached out and held Gong Yi's hand. She raised her face slightly and looked up at Gong Yi with a smile on her face. Her tone was extremely gentle. Do you remember the first time you told me in a panic that Chow Feng was in trouble? But I seemed very calm and didn't feel your nervousness or collapse at all. That was more than half a year ago. At that time, Gong Yi did not expect that the world would change like this. When Chow Feng went to rescue, he was covered with wounds from the explosion and was in critical condition. At that time, Gong Yi was very panicked. Compared to Gong Yi at that time, Huami seemed very calm, even so calm that she seemed quite cold-blooded. At this time, Huami was still very calm. Her fingers, swollen like carrots, clenched Gong Yi's hand and said, "Don't panic. You will encounter many dangerous things in the future. You will find that this situation is nothing compared to what you'll encounter in the future. What does it matter now? It's just that our base has been surrounded by the zombie tide for a few years, or even more than 10 years. I can assure you that we have sufficient supplies and water. Apart from that, as long as you don't fall down, all problems will not be a problem." Gong Yi will eventually understand that she is Gong Yi's greatest confidence. But whatever Huami said was never exaggerated. Gong Yi lowered his eyes and gently kissed Huami's forehead. Then he bent down, put his lips on Huami's belly, and kissed her twice. He got up and left. As soon as he left, Huami sat up, turned around, and arrived at the west side of Xiangqing. Because he still has dozens of square meters of black land, Huami has been setting up teleportation points everywhere in Xiangqing for a long time recently. She made some of the teleportation points public and sold teleportation tickets, while some of the teleportation points were just her personal teleportation points, which were only for her use. The construction of the Western Wall has begun. In addition to the garrison, there are also many survivors killing zombies here. The contractor shouted at the top of his voice, holding a megaphone in his hand, "Hurry up and build the power grid. Before the city wall is built, 10 power grids must be built on the west side of Xiangqing." The slogans were shouted very loudly. The materials on the construction site were piled up like mountains, and mineral water was transported to the construction site in piles. Some workers were halfway through their meal when work began. They would immediately swallow the food in their hands in a few mouthfuls and hurried off to work. The supplies here are not a problem. We are just afraid of not having enough food. We just worry about not having enough food and choking to death. The project is progressing at full speed, and there are both men and women working on the construction site on the west side. In addition to the upright electric fence here, there is also a layer of electric fence laid on the ground, with the intention of killing as many zombies as possible. Huami. A human voice sounded behind Huami. Huami turned around and saw a shining sharp knife flashing before her eyes. She stepped back on tiptoe, and on the messy construction site, she made eye contact with the man holding a knife. Hu Jing, who was walking over, hadn't reacted yet when Huami had already landed. Hu Jing was stunned for 2 breaths, then reacted instantly, rushed forward, and threw the man holding the sharp knife to the ground. "Xiangqing is going to be killed by you, you eternal sinner." He cursed and beat the man on the ground. Huami frowned and said to Hu Jing on the ground, "Leave him alive." She had just been teleported here when such a big thing happened. The man on the ground had a knife in his hand, but before he could raise the knife, the contractor, who was a few steps away, shook off his fat and pounced on the ground while running. "Miss Hua, I'm here to save you. Whoever wants to hurt Miss Hua has to step over my dead body." The contractor's heavy body fell on Hu Jing's back, and Hu Jing screamed "Ah." The killer at the bottom dropped the knife in his hand and spat out blood. It was because he was being suppressed. The contractor shouted anxiously, Hu Jing, are you okay? Don't scare me. You can't be in trouble." The contractor punched the killer, who was spitting blood a few more times through Hu Jing. "You are looking for death. Not only do you want to harm Miss Hua, but you also want to harm our Hu Jing. I will beat you to death." Huami, who watched the whole process from a distance, felt that Hu Jing was really pitiful. If Hu Jing is not rescued, he might be crushed into a cake by the contractor. A few more garrisons rushed over and finally pulled apart the aggressive contractor. The garrisons will use internal torture methods to thoroughly investigate the killer who attempted to attack Huami. The contractor followed behind Huami angrily. "Next time there is such a person, I will beat him to death." He clenched his fists, looking extremely indignant. The main thing is that Huijing was also involved this time. The contractor felt that he could tolerate his aunt, but not his uncle. He turned around and asked someone to check the construction site and eliminate all potential threats. Huami listened to the contractors humming and groaning. She walked around the west and gave him some instructions. With the contractors nodding and bowing service, she sat down under a stall in the west of Xiangqing with her bulging belly to rest. There are no more people setting up stalls outside Xiangqing, but there are still some inside Xiangqing. After all, the Xiangqing base is planned to be so large, covering a total of the original 3 towns and cities. The area is so large that there are all kinds of things going on here. In addition to some women who come to work on the construction site, there are a large number of men coming and going on the site every day. The contractor and Huijing really didn't have the energy to screen people they thought were reliable one by one. Under the parasol, the vendor took out a glass of iced orange juice from the freezer, handed it to Huami, and asked Huami if she wanted a drink. Huami shook her head and touched her belly. She was now trying not to stay in the cold for fear that she would catch a cold or fever at this time, which would make things worse for herself and her child. The vendor looked at Huami's belly and started chatting. How many babies are you carrying? It looks like 3 or 4. Huami shook her head. I got pregnant twice. She is only nearly 8 months pregnant now, but she feels that she is about to give birth in the next 2 days and her contractions are very frequent. Although Xian Chiru has been preparing nutritious meals for her during this period, she has strictly limited her nutritional intake for fear that the child will grow too big and Huami will become increasingly unable to bear it. But her belly is still like a balloon, getting bigger day by day. The street vendor looked at Huami's huge belly in an exaggerated manner, marveling at it. A twin belly is so big. How big must the baby inside be? Nowadays, those who dare to have children are truly courageous. The courageous Huami asked the vendor with a smile. You are quite courageous. You set up your stall here. Aren't you afraid that the zombies from the west will rush in and eat up everything on your stall, the first one to come in? He also ate the vendor's food. Upon hearing this, the vendor pulled out 2 kitchen knives and placed them on his freezer. What are you afraid of? I'll kill anyone who comes. It's already this late, and you won't even let me do some small business? These zombies are really damnable. Before the apocalypse, he was a street vendor doing business and was chased by the urban management every day. After the apocalypse, he had been setting up stalls in Xiangqing to do business, and he didn't think that he should stop doing business just because zombies were coming. If he didn't do business, what should he do? Then the vendor said to Huami, Actually, you don't have to worry. Our Xiangqing base only looks scary from the outside, but Xiangqing has experienced so many natural and man-made disasters. Which one has collapsed? Don't worry, based on my observations from living in Xiangqing for many years, Xiangqing will not fall this time either. Although many people in Xiangqing said that Xiangqing was about to be destroyed. Since the eastern city wall was built, survivors have been prohibited from entering or exiting the south and east. Therefore, the popularity of the west side has increased. There are still many people who choose to go out from the Xiangqing base every day. They all went through the north gate or the west gate. After the north gate was closed these 2 days, there were many more survivors at the west gate. The vendor had been doing business near the west gate. He said to Huami mysteriously, Just stay in this Xiangqing base and give birth to the child. I tell you I have inside information. Xiangqing will not perish. Huami asked with great interest, If you have any inside information, please tell me so that I can feel at ease. The vendor took a chair, sat next to Huami, and whispered, You know that we have sufficient supplies in Xiangqing, right? Let me tell you, before natural disasters or man-made disasters occur, wholesale sources like ours will definitely tighten their supply distribution. Either prices go up or supplies are scarce, but there is none in Xiangqing. We have always had sufficient supplies in Xiangqing. From this perspective, the higher-ups are more than capable of dealing with these disasters. Otherwise, the supply of supplies would definitely fluctuate. The vendor is smart, but not extremely smart. He simply used the most simple wisdom of the working people to analyze that Xiangqing would not be destroyed so quickly. At least in the face of this disaster of zombie siege, the small vendors could see that Xiangqing was prepared to resist and deal with it. Huami looked at him with admiration. It turned out that wisdom lies in the working people. She chatted with the vendor for a few more words, and 2 guards came over, one of whom was Chao Feng. He saluted towards Huami's sister-in-law. The person who assassinated you has confessed. He is Chun Hu's man. Everyone knows that Chun Hu is in City E now. At this point, there is no need for Chun Hu to hide anymore. He also did not have the energy or ability to hide himself any longer. After all, in order to sink oneself and avoid Gong Yi's pursuit, a lot of manpower and material resources are needed to cover up. Chun Hu is no one now. Not only that, he has no money. But no one went after Chun Hu. Everyone in Xiangqing is busy. Huami is busy giving birth to children and repairing the city wall. Gong Yi was busy going to the north to resist the zombie tide coming from the north, and no one had time to kill Chun Hu. What exactly does this Chun Hu want to do? Huami's eyes looked towards the north of Xiangqing. She couldn't help but think of the tide of zombies swarming in from the north of Xiangqing, and what would happen if no one attracted the zombies in the north of Xiangqing. The zombie tide did not form that quickly. Chao Feng also thought of a possibility. His face changed drastically, and he looked towards the north angrily. I only knew that Chun Hu was inhumane before, but I didn't expect that he would not even be a human being. He actually thought of luring all the zombies in the north of Xiangqing down. What on earth does Chun Hu want to do with this bad idea? Didn't Chun Hu ever think that after the Xiangqing base was destroyed and zombies were everywhere, the next target of siege would be the relatively popular E-City? No, neither Chun Hu nor Chu Xian could have thought of it. Chao Feng said solemnly, "What good will it do Chun Hu if Xiangqing is destroyed?" Huami sneered. He thinks it's good for him. Xiangqing has too much supplies. As long as the Xiangqing base is destroyed, won't all the survivors scramble to grab the vast amount of supplies here? At least that's what Chun Hu and his people think. As long as Xiangqing is destroyed, all the supplies will be theirs. That's why Chun Hu sent people to assassinate Huami. Once Huami died, not only would the construction of the western city wall be difficult to continue, but Gong Yi would also have no intention of defending the city in the north. But Chun Hu never imagined that if Huami died, not only would Xiangqing be destroyed, but the massive amount of supplies they wanted would also disappear. After all, Xiangqing's current rich material resources all come from Huami alone. At this time, Qichuan received the news that Huami was assassinated, and he and Qinjun hurried over from different directions. Qichuan took out a stack of papers, handed them to Huami, and whispered, "The news from East City is that the survivors there are having a hard time. Many of them are trying to seek help from Xiang City, hoping that Xiang City can send people to rescue them." Rescue? For a moment, Huami thought she had heard wrongly. The survivors who went to City E asked for help from Xiangqing, which was about to be destroyed. The contractor, Qin Zhen, and Chao Feng standing by all had varying degrees of sarcasm on their faces. Even the street vendors who didn't understand what was going on laughed out loud. Xiangqing can't even save itself. Who else can we save now? In City E, where the living environment is harsh, people in the city increasingly stop treating their labor force as human beings. Chun Hu ordered the construction of a city wall in City E, so the strong labor force from Xiangqing went to City E and began to work day and night in the dark. The Chu family sent supervisors, divided into several groups, to keep an eye on the survivors 24 hours a day. If any survivors slacked off, the supervisors would come forward and beat and kick them. Not only that, they also did not allow the survivors to leave City E. There are survivors who would rather leave City E without taking any money or food. It is said that under the leadership of Hu Yanxiang, they have taken away all the energy drops from the survivors. Several people died because of this. The vendor asked curiously, "Aren't energy drops readily available in our Xiangqing? Is it worth dying for?" He couldn't really understand the people in East City. Why were the supplies so scarce? Because he had always stayed in Xiang City and had never been out, he lacked the most realistic understanding of the outside world. The vendor only knows that, at present, energy drops can be seen everywhere on the construction sites west of Xiangqing. As long as you participate in building the city wall, energy drops will be provided free of charge. Ikegawa didn't know how to explain it. East City was really too poor. He could only continue to say, because those survivors had no supplies to escape, and they were under close surveillance by the East City base. So they managed to send us a message, hoping that we could lend a hand and rescue them. After hearing the news brought by Chi Chuan, Chao Feng, Qin Zhen, and Huami all frowned. Huami asked coldly, with her belly sticking out, "You were so determined when you left. Why are you coming back now?" When Hu Yanxiang took the survivors away, she told them about it. No matter what happens in the future, Xiangqing will no longer accept them and will no longer open its doors and arms to welcome these survivors. This is very clear. It's not like I haven't said it before. Qinjin nodded and said, "Besides, our Xiangqing base is facing internal and external troubles, and there are many other things going on. Where do we get the time and energy to rescue this group of workers who have left?" The labor force left Xiangqing in batches. The first time Hu Yanxiang took away more than 1,000 people. They came one after another, and it was said that by the time they arrived at City E, there were only about 1,000 people left. Later, as the external environment of Xiangqing base continued to deteriorate, more and more people left Xiangqing base. There are probably 2,000 to 3,000 survivors in City E alone. It would take a lot of manpower and resources to rescue these 2,000 or 3,000 people from City E. There is already a shortage of manpower at the Xiangqing base. Huami directly refused. No, let them find a way to get out of Xiangqing base. Don't go to Xiangqing South and Xiangqing East, as those areas have been sealed off. Xiangqing West will also be closed soon. If they can reach Xiangqing West before it is closed, then the Xiangqing base can accept them. If they have no way to reach Xiangqing West, then so be it. Life or death is their own choice, and no one else is to blame. After saying this, Huami stood up with her belly bulging. She walked in front of Chao Feng, raised her hand, and patted Chao Feng's shoulder heavily. "I know that as garrisons, it is against your professional ethics to stand by and watch someone die without helping. But you have to think about the current situation. Your commander is fighting against the zombie tide in the north. He didn't bring many people to the north in the first place. Almost all the elite garrison troops in Xiangqing base were moved to the north. And you guys stay in Xiangqing base. We need to send one group of people to the south and another group to the east. More energy should be focused on the west. The battle in the west will be difficult to fight. I estimate that within 2 days, the zombies in the south will roll over to the west. We don't have much time left. We shouldn't disperse our energy to help those who don't even know what they want." Those survivors said they were wrong, and Huami also felt that they were wrong. In the message they sent to Xiangqing, they deeply regretted their original willful behavior, and explained how they think problems are too simple and how they view the world too naively. But even if you realize your mistakes, what can you do? Not everyone has the chance to start over like Huami. We only have one life. If you take a wrong step, the outcome will be disastrous. With the result we have today, the survivors who went to City E should accept their original determination. Everyone is like this and must pay for their own actions. Chao Feng nodded, stood in front of Huami, and whispered, "I understand. Sister Hua, I won't act on impulse. Garrison is the last bottom line for mankind. There is no doubt about that. However, this also includes the main bottom line and the secondary bottom line. It is impossible for Chao Feng to leave such a large Xiangqing base unprotected and instead transfer personnel to East City to rescue people. East City is so far away from Xiangqing base. After they leave, Xiangqing base will immediately fall into the crisis of empty defense. No matter how thick the power grid is or how high the city walls are, there will always be risks for the Xiangqing base." Chao Feng wouldn't be so stupid. After getting Chao Feng's assurance, Huami finally felt relieved. She looked at the busy construction of the western city wall. It was still unknown how many people here were Chen Hu and Chu Shiheng's men. According to the information received by Chi Chuan, someone would enter the Xiangqing base every day, obtain energy drops, and then take them out of the city in batches. There is no way to trace where this batch of energy droplets went. In this emergency situation, it is clear that City E has evil intentions towards Xiangqing base. Although she knew Chun who wanted her dead, Huami could do nothing. If even after all this, there are still people who smuggle energy drops out of the Xiangqing base to E-City. It only proves that Xiangqing does have a lot of energy drops. The people of Xiangqing no longer cherish it. In addition, I come to the West every day to inspect the progress of the project and solve all the problems that can be solved. Next, Huami once again instructed the contractor to lay more layers of electric fence and build the city wall more solidly. Time was urgent. Not long after Huami finished speaking, the garrison came to report that a small group of zombies had attacked them in the west. Chao Feng raised his hand and led the garrison on the west, rushing towards the direction of the power grid. Gunshots rang out, and Huami stood there listening with a very bad look on her face. She turned her head to Qin Zhen and said, "Be prepared. This wave of zombies today won't be so easy to destroy." Hearing the continuous gunfire, Huami knew that there was a big problem. Chao Feng was completely trapped in the west of Xiangqing. She turned around, upgraded her factory, and leveled up the recycling station. Dozens of sweeping robots were found. Huami placed all these sweeping robots in the west of Xiangqing. These sweeping robots will enter the zombie tide, automatically clean up the zombie corpses, and collect the crystal cores. Those crystal cores will be placed into Huami's warehouse by robots. It will not be used directly. As Huami said, Chao Feng was trapped by the zombies in the west. He led his team to kill them, and the killing lasted until night. By midnight, the number of zombies coming from the west not only did not decrease, but increased instead. One layer of the power grid was destroyed, but the contractor directed the workers to build another 10 power grids behind the last one. The factory manager also sent truckloads of jelly lime mixed with energy drops to the west. The generator was clanging, and there was enough electricity in Xiangqing. Huami returned to the rescue center and had just laid down when she heard some noise outside the door. Tu Lijia, the young nurse who was in charge of taking care of Huami, thought she was here to make rounds. She stood up and was about to open the door. Huami called Tu Lijia and said, "Wait a minute." Just as he finished speaking, the door of the ward was kicked open. The man outside the door held 2 guns in his hands and fired several shots at the inside. Just as the people outside the door opened fire, Huami had already come to Tu Lijia's side and pulled Tu Lijia's body to avoid the bullet. The killer outside the door put down his gun and looked at the empty bed. He was just about to look for where Huamiren was. The door in front of him was slammed shut. Huamiren stood behind the killer at some point without knowing it. She, with her big belly, patted the killer's shoulder. The killer turned around and saw a flash of light in front of him. Her movements were quick and decisive, not at all like a pregnant woman who was about to give birth. The tightly closed ward door was opened, and Tu Lijia stood inside the ward with a confused look on her face and asked, "Ami, what happened?" Hot blood spurted out from the gap and fell on Tu Lijia's face. Tu Lijia's eyes widened and he fell backwards. Huami pushed away the killer who was still standing in front of her, reached out and held Tu Lijia's hand to prevent Tu Lijia from breaking the back of her head. At this time, Xi and Chiru came running over with a group of nurses. Seeing the mess at the scene, she asked nervously, Ami, are you okay?" Huami waved her hands to indicate that she was fine. This morning, she deliberately spread the rumor that the energy drops in the Xiangqing base were in crisis of shortage. Everyone knows that Xiangqing's energy drops are no longer as many as before. Then those who transport energy drops out of the Xiangqing base naturally have to consider whether to meet the needs of E-City first, or their own needs first. If you want to recharge the energy drops at the Xiangqing base, you must kill Huami first. If Huami is not killed, the energy drop will be stuck. Anyway, no matter what the reason is, Huami will die. Xin Chiru's face was full of worry. She looked at Huami's big belly and asked, "Should we change your ward?" She couldn't understand why Huami would say such things to the outside world. This means that Huami regards herself as a living target. Anyone who lurks in Xiangqing and wants to obtain the energy drops wants to kill Huami, in order to free the production of energy drops from being restricted. After all, before Huami goes into production, energy drops will no longer be produced in large quantities. This proves that Huami can decide whether this thing called energy drops can be produced in large quantities. It's only natural that others want to kill her because she's stuck in childbirth. Huami touched her big belly and explained, I just want to get rid of all the assassins lurking in Xiangqing before giving birth. Who knows if those evil spirits will come to trouble me when I'm giving birth. Now, of course, we'll kill as many as we can. Seeing that Huami was about to give birth, she had to kill Chun Hu's men while she still had some strength. Looking at the ambitious Huami, Xian Qiru was helpless. If it were an ordinary pregnant woman, she would have been scared to death if she knew someone wanted to kill her. Is there anyone like Huami who takes the initiative to spread the word, making herself a living target to attract killers to kill her? Xian Qiru sighed deeply and looked at Huami with worry. So, what should we do now? You're about to give birth. Tell me, how should I protect you? Huami waved his hand with great ambition. I don't need your protection. I can kill those assassins with evil intentions while I am still alive. She has the ability and the confidence. But Xian Qiru looked at Huami with worry. Was she talking about this problem? She was not worried about her own safety. How could a woman have a gunfight while giving birth? Throughout history, Xian Qiru had only seen a pregnant woman like Huami do this. In sharp contrast to the tense situation in Xiangqing, City E is obviously much more relaxed. But this is just the ease of the external environment, not the ease of the survivors within. On the contrary, the survivors inside City E are now living in dire straits. At the construction site in City E, a bare-chested survivor squatted on the ground, looking skinny, and asked other survivors, "Didn't you send a signal to the Xiangqing base a long time ago? Didn't the Xiangqing base receive our signal? Why haven't any people come to rescue us yet? There are currently 2,000 to 3,000 people here, and there must be one person whose cell phone has power. It's impossible that there are 2,000 or 3,000 people and all of their cell phones are out of battery. It is no secret that East City abused survivors. Is it possible for us to get some teleportation tickets back to Xiangqing from the new survivors? There are survivors with wild ideas. The truth is that when they left Xiangqing, they thought they would never return to that place again. So, I didn't have any tickets to return to the city. It is said that another group of survivors came today, and they were searched by Hu Yanxiang as soon as they arrived. I heard that not only were their energy drops taken away, but even the supplies they brought out from the Xiangqing base were taken away. The survivor squatting on the ground was full of sorrow and pulling his short hair. I really don't know what these people are doing in East City. 2 more survivors who tried to escape died this morning. Their bodies were hanging on the other side of the barbed wire. From the looks of them, they must have died with their eyes open. Obviously, the outside world's evaluation of Xiangqing base and East City is very different from the facts. The outside world says that the Xiangqing base is about to be destroyed by a tide of zombies, and soon the Xiangqing base will disappear from the survivors' map. The outside world also says that East City is a very good place, safe, comfortable, and has a good environment. It is the real Garden of Eden for the survivors. Only those who have actually been to East City know that there is no comparison between East City and Xiangqing base. That is to say, there are no zombies outside East City, but there is a row of corpses hanging outside East City, all of whom were killed by the Chu family in East City. Crouching on the ground, the shirtless survivor was skinny and bony, with several whip marks on his back, all from being beaten by the Chu family's supervisor. If they were any slower in building the city wall, the Chu family supervisor would whip them. The survivor squatting on the ground said fiercely, I did receive news from the people at Xiangqing base. The Xiangqing base is still alive. Yes, it's been so long, and he's still alive. It is said that the south and east sides of Xiangqing base have been sealed off, and the survivors have no way to enter or exit. If we want to return to Xiangqing base, we can only enter from the north or west. This is a fact that is difficult to accept because city exists to the east of Xiangqing base, which is the shortest route to Xiangqing base. If they wanted to go around to the north or west, they would have to travel a lot further. But now it is so dangerous outside the Xiangqing base that no one can make up their mind. If they get close to the Xiangqing base, will it attract zombies? The key is whether the Xiangqing base is really peaceful enough to warrant their risking their lives to return to the base. If no one comes to rescue them, it will be very difficult for them to return on their own. Someone sighed. What a pity. It would be great if we still had the transfer ticket to Xiangqing base. Only those who have truly left the Xiangqing base know how hard it is to get a teleportation ticket, which was once available on the streets. Hu Yanxiang, a minion of the Chu family and Chen who has also been collecting teleportation tickets to the Xiangqing base recently. They wanted to borrow the teleportation ticket, return to the Xiangqing base, and then bring out the energy drops and supplies from the Xiangqing base. However, it is said that in the Xiangqing base, not only the production of energy drops is restricted, but even the sale of teleportation tickets is limited. One of the survivors asked with hope, "If we make ourselves sound more pitiful, the garrison at Xiangqing base won't really ignore us, right?" You should know that the garrison at Xiangqing base is the most responsible and professional among all the city garrisons. It was impossible for them to just watch the 2,000 or 3,000 survivors in City E die. If they really understood the living conditions of the survivors in City E, perhaps they wouldn't have to wait for the survivors in City E to run back to the Xiangqing base on their own. Gong Yi from the Xiangqing base will be sent to help them eliminate Chu Xiang and Chen Hu. Everyone was silent, not knowing how likely this was. At this moment, Chu Yimin and a few women walked past the crowd. She saw a group of skinny survivors chatting in an open space. Chu Yimin's face turned serious, and he pointed at the supervisor beside him and said sarcastically, "Do you really think that our Chu family supplies are free? We spend so much supplies every day to supply these people, and they are actually lazy here. Hurry over and let them do the work." The Chu family supervisors immediately stood up, whips in their hands, and waved at the survivors squatting on the ground. Every whip would leave deep blood marks on the person's body. Chu Yimin looked at the survivors in the open space. They were being driven to work like chickens, with fear and panic on their faces. She giggled with delight. "This is really refreshing." Hu Yanxiang, who was not far away, ran over and said to Chu Yimin with a flattering smile, "Hey, young lady, why are you in a place like this?" Speaking of which, Hu Yanxiang is not very old, at most in his 30s. Chu Yimin is still unmarried in her 20s and doesn't even have a man. Faced with such a young girl, Hu Yanxiang naturally had his own ideas. He felt that if he could please Chu Yimin, she would favor him. If Hu Yanxiang had been at the East City base, he would definitely have worked less for decades. Chu Yimin looked at Hu Yanxiang with eyes that were not eyes and a nose that was not a nose. She snorted disdainfully, "This is my family's base. I come when I want to and leave when I want to. What's it to you?" That's right, now the Chu family and Chen who have told the outside world that they want to build East City into a base, and they also call themselves the East City base. Although compared to the Xiangqing base, the East City base is not even 1/10 of the size of the Xiangqing base. But they want to call themselves a base. What can we do? Yes, Hu Yanxiang continued to nod and bow, and his flattering attitude was even more than that of the contractor towards Hua Malay. But the contractor's fawning on Hua Mi does not make people feel disgusted, because the contractor is simply fawning on Hua Mi. Hu Yanxiang was different. Chu Yimin was annoyed by this. She slapped Hu Yanxiang on the face. She treated him like a dog. "If you look at me like that again, I'll have my brother dig your eyes out." After saying that, Chu Yimin turned around angrily and went to find her brother Chu Xiang. Chu Xiang was in the tent, talking to Chen Hu. The two talked about nothing more than how to build a base in East City, how to get supplies from Xiang City, and how to find the teleportation point of East City before Xiang City was completely surrounded by the zombie tide. They want to use the East City teleportation point to successfully transfer the supplies in Xiang City back to East City. That's right, until now, they still believe that the teleportation point is a gift from God to the survivors. As long as you look carefully, you will find teleportation points everywhere in this apocalypse. City E is no exception. I only heard Chen Hu say confidently, "As long as we open up the transmission points between East City and Xiang City, we can transport large quantities of materials from Xiang City to East City, omitting the process." Everyone knows that there are a large number of zombies outside the Xiangqing base. If you want to bring supplies out of the Xiangqing base, you must break through the zombies in this city. This is very dangerous. If we are not careful, we might bring the zombies outside the Xiangqing base to East City. Therefore, at the Xiangqing base, Before it was about to be completely surrounded by zombies, Chen Hu and Chu Xiang did not have much time left. Chu Xiang was also worried about this question, but where is the teleportation point? How many teleportation points are there near Yi City? None of us knows. Regarding this point, they really wanted to ask Huami how she found so many teleportation points in Xiangqing. However, Huami had to die. There was no other way to talk. If this woman doesn't die, it will be even more difficult to get the supplies and energy drops from the Xiangqing base. While they were chatting, Chu Yimin came into the tent angrily. Seeing Chu Yimin pouting her red lips and looking angry, Chen Hu asked with a smile, "What happened to Miss Chu? Who offended our Miss Chu?" Chu Xiang also looked at his sister with a doting expression. There are not many people left in their Chu family now. Chu Shiheng's baby, Chu Yimin, is a very cruel baby. Chu Yimin stamped her feet and looked outside the tent. It's still that Hu Yanxiang, always looking at me with those lustful eyes. As she spoke, she hugged Chu Shiheng's arm and said coquettishly, "Brother, just dig out Hu Yanxiang's eyes. I feel annoyed when I see his eyes staring at me." She said this without showing any girlish reserve. I don't think there's anything cruel in saying such things. It's the end of the world. If Chu Yimin was not Chu Shiheng's sister, and if their Chu family did not have such a strong influence in Yi City, Chu Yimin would have become Hu Yanxiang's possession long ago. When she thought of this, Chu Yimin felt sick all over and just wanted to kill Hu Yanxiang as soon as possible. Chu Xiang patted the back of Chu Yimin's hand soothingly. Hu Yanxiang is still useful. I have to keep him to do things for me. After a pause, Chu Xiang looked at Chu Yimin again. His sister had grown up and was old enough to recruit someone. He didn't know about other people, but Chu Xiang alone knew that there were many men in the Yi City base who had feelings for Chu Yimin. There was no way. Chu Yimin was not ugly, and she was the daughter of the Chu family and Chu Shiheng's biological sister. With such status and position, how could anyone who wanted to gain a foothold in Yi City and achieve great things not have any thoughts about her? Chu Yimin refused to do it and pulled Chu Shiheng's arm to act like a spoiled child. I don't care. That Hu Yanxiang is so annoying. Brother, please help me find a way to kill that Hu Yanxiang.
Que Xiang glerdat que Yima.
He was currently discussing important matters with Chen Hu. How could he have the time to comfort his own sister? Don't be willful. Chen Hu, who was standing by, rolled his green bean-sized eyes in his eye sockets and said to Chu Xiang with a smile, "Our Miss Chu has grown up, and there are many people who like her. Killing Hu Yanxiang is not a big deal, but Master Chu should think carefully about who else in this world is worthy of our Miss Chu." As he spoke, he pointed meaningfully in the direction of Xiangqing. Chu Xiang naturally thought of Gong Yi from the Xiangqing base. He seemed to be thinking about something and looked at Chu Yimin carefully again. Compared to the fat and fair Huami, Chu Yimin can be regarded as a fairy-like figure, right? It is said that Gong Yi is also good-looking. It's just that Gong Yi seldom asks about the things happening in the Xiangqing base. He spends more time fighting outside the Xiangqing base. Before the zombies came out, Gong Yi had been hunting down and destroying Chen Hu's forces. After the zombies came out, Gong Yi's focus was on how to suppress the zombies. People at the Xiangqing base rarely see Gong Yi appear in the base. Compared to Gong Yi, more people have only heard of Huami's name. Chu Xiang suddenly felt a headache and sent Chu Yimin away. He looked at Chen Hu with a serious face. "Boss Chen, I only have one sister. I can't possibly joke about her lifelong affairs." Chu Xiang knew the grudge between Chen Hu and Gong Yi. If it weren't for Gong Yi, who had been weakening Chen Hu's power all along, Chen Hu wouldn't have only had so few people left now. The ability is not limited to this. To be honest, Chu Xiang knew how cruel and ruthless Chen Hu was. Based on his previous understanding of Chen Hu was a person who was quite suitable for surviving in a doomsday environment. Gong Yi has been suppressing Chen Hu severely all along. Chu Xiang knew that Chen Hu and Gong Yi would fight to the death. Chen Hu will definitely find an opportunity to kill Gong Yi. And Gong Yi, if he sees Chen Hu, he will definitely kill Chen Hu. So when Chen Hu hinted to Chu Xiang that he could pair Chu Yimin with Gong Yi, countless conspiracies and intrigues flashed through Chu Shiheng's mind in an instant. He emphasized seriously, "No matter what, I can't possibly joke about my sister's life event. Chun Hu smiled like a Maitreya Buddha, with a kind smile on his fat face. You are a narrow-minded person. There is a saying that goes, if you can't beat him, just join him. I am convinced by Gong Yi. I also know that if Gong Yi hadn't been suppressing me, I wouldn't be where I am today. But think about it from another angle. Gong Yi is indeed a talented person. If you marry your sister to Gong Yi will be your brother-in-law. As a brother-in-law, do you have the nerve to keep suppressing your brother-in-law? Xiangqing base has no chance of surviving, but our East City base is different. If East City base can persuade Gong Yi to join the army, I believe the future prospects of East City base will not be bad. Listen, this is Chun Hu's pattern. Why is it that Chun Hu, who is obviously weaker than Chu Xiang, can be on par with Chu Xiang in East City today? This is the character of Chun Hu. Chun Hu said this, looking at Chu Xiang carefully. He raised his hand and patted Chu Xiang's shoulder. You have to understand that the one who has a grudge against you is that woman Huami, not Gong Yi.
You have to be clear about this.
I believe you are a smart person, and I believe Gong Yi is also a smart person. On the premise that everyone is a smart person, Gong Yi is still a garrison, and the garrison's mission is to protect the last bottom line of mankind. He was protecting Xiangqing base, and now that Xiangqing base was destroyed, wasn't he also protecting East City base? Think about this carefully. Chun Hu, who has a big picture, smiled and did ideological work for Chu Xiang. Chu Xiang didn't say anything, his eyes were lost in thought. I have to say that Chun Hu's words are very provocative. Yes, guarding the Xiangqing base is guarding, and guarding the East City base is also guarding, isn't it? Gong Yi is stationed there. As long as there are survivors, he should devote himself to the survivors and die for them. What neither Chu Xiang nor Chun Hu noticed was that at the same time they were saying this. Outside the tent, Chu Yimin eavesdropped on their conversation with a flushed face. The girl, who had reached marriageable age, turned away shyly and ran back to her tent. Once inside her tent, she threw herself onto the bed, burying her red face in it and kicking her feet desperately. What should I do? It would be fine if I didn't think about it, but when I thought about my future husband, it turned out to be Gong Yi from Xiangqing base. Chu Yimin, who had never even seen what Gong Yi looked like, was already attracted to him. What girl doesn't admire a hero? For a long time, Gong Yi from Xiangqing base has almost become a legend in the hearts of the survivors. Although there is not much information about how Gong Yi governed the Xiangqing base, Gong Yi was the garrison commander of the Xiangqing base. The fact that he could chase Chun Hu everywhere was itself a manifestation of his ability. If Chu Yimin could really marry Gong Yi, that wouldn't be a bad thing. A young girl in love always wants to be moved. After a few hours, she didn't know how many romantic plots she had played out in her heart. In the end, when Chu Yimin walked out of her tent, she actually felt that the only person in the world who was worthy of her was Gong Yi. Only a rich lady like her can be worthy of a hero like Gong Yi. And at this time, Chu Yimin met Hu Yanxiang, who came to show his courtesy. Hu Yanxiang was holding a box of cake in his hand. He happily walked to Chu Yimin and handed the newly acquired cake to her. Here, this is something I found on a survivor who just came to East City. Miss Chu, I'm giving it to you. As Hu Yanxiang spoke, his obscene eyes lightly fell on Chu Yimin's chest. Chu Yimin was extremely disgusted with Hu Yanxiang. She raised her hand and directly knocked the cake in Hu Yanxiang's hand to the ground with a smack. She said in a cold voice, "What kind of disgusting person would have kept the cake for a few days and actually deliver it to me? Don't send me these things again. I know what you mean. Bah, you're just a toad wanting to eat swan meat? I tell you, only someone like Gong Yi is worthy of me in this world." Hu Yanxiang's face fell. But Chu Yimin did not stop her ruthless sarcasm. My brother's East City base will become the #1 base in the end times, and my only man is Gong Yi. Compared to Gong Yi, you are far behind. Everyone knows that as the only eldest daughter of the Chu family, Chu Yimin's man will not have a low status in the East City base in the future. As long as the East City base can really survive the apocalypse, Chu Xiang is the top leader in the E-City base, so Chu Yimin's man is either the second in command or the third in command in the E-City base. This position is quite tempting. Hu Yanxiang looked at the cake that was knocked to the ground by Chu Yimin, and his expression gradually became ugly. Staring at Chu Yimin's proud back, Chu Xiang couldn't help but said coldly, "Miss Chu, you're planning something."
What?
"Are you and Gong Yi already involved?" Chu Yimin was about to leave, but she didn't expect Hu Yanxiang to dare to speak to her like that. So she turned around and was about to ridicule Hu Yanxiang. But then Hu Yanxiang said, "But Miss Chu, don't forget that Gong Yi is a married man. He has a wife and a child, and his wife is about to give birth. You and your brother are aware of this. How can you marry Gong Yi when Huami is still alive? How could Gong Yi marry you? It is said that Gong Yi is a person with special abilities. What are you?" Hu Yanxiang didn't know why Chu Yimin was so stupid. Before she even had a clue about her destiny, she was already thinking about marrying Gong Yi. What a joke. Chu Yimin's face flushed red, as if her passion and the young girl's heart that was just beginning to fall in love were poured a bucket of cold water by Hu Yanxiang's words. She stamped her feet and said angrily, "Don't bother with that. Since you said you want to marry Gong Yi, then my man can only be Gong Yi. Even if it wasn't Gong Yi, it wouldn't be someone like you." After saying that, Chu Yimin raised her head and chest proudly and left. Hu Yanxiang was left behind, his face full of anger. "It's a nonsense. If it weren't for the fact that you are Chu Shiheng's sister, I wouldn't be trying to please you like this." Hu Yanxiang was angrily and turned away. Of course, he would not give up the possibility of becoming Chu Shiheng's brother-in-law so easily. But now Gong Yi suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and Hu Yanxiang felt annoyed. He returned to the E-City base, pointed at a good-looking woman on the road, and pushed her back to his tent. A woman's scream came from his tent. Hu Yanxiang didn't leave his tent for a long time. To be honest, Hu Yanxiang was quite free and easy, but the words he left in Chu Yimin's heart left a knot in her heart. Finally, Chu Yimin couldn't help but find her brother Chu Xiang. With red eyes, she hugged her brother Chu Shiheng's arm and asked, "Brother, I want to marry Gong Yi. I want Gong Yi to come to our E-City base. Is there any way to make that witch Huami and her child die sooner? Haven't you been trying to get rid of Huami? Why hasn't she died yet?" The original Chu Yimin didn't want Huami to die so strongly. To her, Huami was just a woman who hindered the flow of materials from Xiangqing to E-City. But ever since she wanted to marry Gong Yi, Huami gradually became a thorn in Chu Yimin's heart. She didn't even want to keep Gong Yi's child, let alone Gong Yi's woman. Now, Chu Yimin just wants Huami and her child to die quickly. Chu Xiang was also bothering him about this matter. "We have lost a lot of assassins in the past few days in the assassination of Huami. Some of them were about Huami, who was assassinated on a construction site west of Xiangqing. Some of them rushed directly to Huami's ward with guns and tried to kill her. But I don't know what kind of supernatural powers this woman had. So many killers were killed, but none of them could kill her. Nowadays, there are not many killers left in the Xiangqing base." Chu Yimin came to Chu Xiang crying, and Chu Xiang felt very annoyed. It was impossible to kill Huami, and Chu Yimin kept crying and making a fuss. Chu Xiang couldn't help but pull his arms out of Chu Yimin's hands. He shouted at Chu Yimin impatiently, "Cry, cry, cry. Why are you so useless? If you want to kill Huami, just find a way to kill her yourself. Can't you see I'm busy here?" After saying that, Chu Xiang left Chu Yimin and turned away. Chu Yimin stamped her feet on the spot. "Go if you wanna. Do you think I don't dare to go? Her brother is actually quite useless sometimes. Isn't it just killing a pregnant woman?" Chu Yimin went to kill it herself. She also had a ticket to the Xiangqing base in her hand. Feeling so angry, Chu Yimin actually took the teleportation ticket to Xiangqing base and teleported herself to Xiangqing base. There are fewer and fewer teleportation tickets to Xiangqing base, because there are many survivors who have escaped from the Xiangqing base, but at the same time, there are more and more survivors who have suffered various kinds of beatings outside and still think that the Xiangqing base is good. As the transmission tickets were tightened, those that had been issued became priceless. As soon as Chu Yimin was teleported to the Xiangqing base, she had thought of the entire plan. After leaving the observation area, she, as the eldest daughter of the Chu family of the East City base, represented the East City base to negotiate cooperation with the Xiang City base. Then go directly to the north of Xiangqing base, find Gong Yi, and create an opportunity for the two to get along. Huami can keep him for later and kill him when she finds a chance, but she must grab Gong Yi's heart as soon as possible. Only if she captures a man's heart will Gong Yi abandon his wife and children for her. It has to be said that Chu Yimin, a young lady who is not very worldly wise, thinks about this matter too romantically. It was not until one day after Chu Yimin left that Chu Xiang found out that Chu Yimin had directly transferred him to the Xiangqing base. He couldn't help laughing in anger, pounding the table and shouting, "Why is my sister so troublesome? The Xiangqing base is about to be destroyed by zombies. How did she get herself into the Xiangqing base?" Chun, who on the side, said with a smile, "Forget it, Miss Chu is a lucky person. Maybe she can really bring your brother-in-law back when she goes to Xiangqing base this time. Men are all lustful. Our Miss Chu is not bad-looking. It would be fine if that woman Huami died quickly." Chun, who was smiling from beginning to end, as if he had never expected that Chu Yimin would go to the Xiangqing base. After laughing, he couldn't help but give Chu Xing a thumbs up. "Miss Chu, you are truly a heroine. You are willing to sacrifice yourself for love. It is really admirable." Chu Xiang rolled his eyes at Chun, who stood up, walked out of the tent, and called someone in the Xiangqing base. He wanted the undercover agents in the Xiangqing base to protect Chu Yimin well and to cooperate with Chu Yimin to the best of their ability when necessary. In addition, Chu Yimin must be brought back from Xiangqing base before the zombies attack the Xiangqing base. Speaking of which, why hasn't the Xiangqing base been swallowed up by zombies yet? Chu Xiang hung up the phone and looked at Chen Hu. "How many days has it been? Huami, who was originally thought to be giving birth, has not given birth yet. The Xiangqing base, which was thought to be about to be swallowed up by zombies, is still standing intact. What's going on? The Xiangqing base has recently fallen into a vicious circle. So, every day a large number of survivors flow out of the Xiangqing base. Some went to City E, some started their own businesses, and some went to other cities. After going out, many people returned to the Xiangqing base. Everyone who came back tried to bring out a large amount of supplies from the Xiangqing base before it was destroyed. Therefore, the return of a large number of survivors brought a large number of crystal nuclei. After all, if the survivors want to shop in Xiangqing, they need to exchange crystal cores for shopping cards. The money in Huami's hands was charged into the shopping card like water every day. Once the shopping cards are issued, they will be snapped up by the survivors, with Huami having unlimited supply of supplies. This caused the number of crystal cores in Huami's hands to surge. She had to open up a special space in her level 40 warehouse to store the crystal cores. And under the premise of only using energy drops, energy crystal beads, etc., the zombie crystal core in Huami's hand is actually useless. Purely hoarding goods. Huami was a little melancholy, looking at the crystal cores that looked like a towering mountain, lying on the hospital bed, wondering what to do with this mountain of crystal cores. Who could have known that the crystal cores that were extremely precious in the previous life, which could replenish the supernatural energy of the supernatural, and could also be used as currency? There is actually no place for my skills in this life. Qin Jun pushed the door open from outside the ward. She said to Huami with a serious face, "We received news from E-City. E-City said they want to cooperate with our Xiangqing base." Huami raised her eyes expressionlessly and looked at Qin Jun, asking Qin Jun to continue. Currently, Chu Yimin from the so-called E-City base has arrived at the Xiangqing quarantine area. It is said that they came this time with 120,000 points of sincerity, hoping to purchase supplies from Xiangqing at a low price. As a condition, they will also transfer the survivors of our Xiangqing base to their Qing base. After hearing what Qin Jun said, Huami was confused. She had no idea what was going on in the minds of Chu Xiang and Chen Hu from E-City. Weren't they the ones who had always hoped that Xiangqing base would be destroyed? What did they mean by cooperating with Xiangqing base? The survivors of Xiangqing Base didn't want to stay or go. Why was it said that E-City Base was doing Xiangqing a big favor by accepting the survivors? Looking at Huami's confused expression, Qingjun said, only Qingjun and Huami knew that Gong Yi was only a garrison commander in Xiangqing Base. In fact, in the Xiangqing Base, the one in charge is not Gong Yi but Huami. Those people centered around Huami, such as Qingjun, formed an informal management class. The Xiangqing Base apparently has no management level. However, Huami has the final say on everything in Xiangqing. She and her people are an informal management class. If other cities want to find the Xiangqing Base and have any problems with material transportation, they can only contact Qingjun or Afu's family. Or contacting Qichuan would be more useful than contacting Gong Yi. Among them, the outside world would tacitly accept Qingjun as the personnel manager of Xiangqing Base. If you want help to receive the survivors of Xiangqing Base, the person you should look for is Qingjun. If you want to discuss purchasing supplies, you should go to Afu's family. But for some reason, City E did not contact Qingjun directly, but instead insisted on finding Gong Yi. Huami thought about it, then sneered and said to Qingjun, I think they came to E-City because they felt that Xiangqing Base couldn't survive, so they were trying to win over Gong Yi. Gong Yi is an expert at defending the city. At least under the leadership of Gong Yi, the thousands of garrisons in Xiangqing have been trained and tempered for more than half a year, and they have already become able to climb walls and fly over roofs. Each garrison is a fighter jet that kills zombies. Think about it. If City E could get Gong Yi's help, it would be much better than equipping its own base with countless high-tech weapons. After hearing what Huami said, Qingjun punched the wall in anger. Why are these people so shameless? Will Xiangqing really be drowned in the zombie tide as they wish? Xiangqing is about to be destroyed. Xiangqing is about to be destroyed. It has been said for a long time that Xiangqing is going to be destroyed. But Xiangqing has always existed and has never been destroyed by the zombie dynasty. Not only that, the construction of city walls on the south and east sides greatly liberated the garrison defense forces of the Xiangqing Base. Now the garrison and survivors of Xiangqing Base are gathered in the west. Experts originally said that the Xiangqing Base would soon be surrounded by zombies within a few days. However, more than half a month has passed since this was said, and the Xiangqing Base is still doing well. The zombies in the west have also been under control. Huami didn't say anything. She took out her cell phone, thought about it, and called Qichuan. Let Qichuan check if there are any people from E-City Base in Xiangqing Base. This check really allowed Huami to find out that Chu Yimin from E-City Base was making trouble in the Xiangqing quarantine area. Ikuo said to Huami in great distress on the other end of the phone, this Chu Yimin has been saying that she wants to go to the north of Xiangqing Base, and on behalf of the management of E-City Base, she wants us at Xiangqing Base to cooperate with her. It's so annoying. Huami frowned slightly, got up from the bed, and while enduring the severe contractions, she said to Qingjun, let's go to the quarantine area and take a look. Qingjun looked at Huami disapprovingly, but Huami had already opened the door of the ward and walked out of the rescue center. Fu drove her to the quarantine area. In the isolation area, Chu Yimin was getting angry at the medical staff. She pointed at the noses of the medical staff and said, I was sent from the E-City Base. I am the eldest daughter of the Chu family. Why did you arrange for me to eat these things? She looked very aggrieved. It would be fine if the food was not good in the E-City Base, but there were sufficient supplies in the Xiang City Base, and the meals arranged for Chu Yimin were actually the same as those for other survivors. Please, she is the eldest daughter of the Chu family. How can you let her eat these things? The medical staff on duty in the isolation area, wearing protective clothing, stared at Chu Yimin, the eldest daughter, and each of them was full of impatience. Someone pointed directly at her and said, everyone eats this way. How is it different for you, a survivor from E-City, and the survivors who came back from outside? Everyone is the same, and why can't we eat the food in this quarantine area? These medical staff are not exaggerating. In which of the cities that are still able to survive now, the food is as good as that in Xiangqing Base? Look at what they provide to these survivors in the quarantine area. Oatmeal porridge, big root fried dough sticks, bacon, steamed buns, chocolate cake, milk. There are so many foods in just one meal. 3 meals a day, and never the same. Since the quarantine area was built, only Chu Yimin had objections to these things. How could other survivors be so picky? Chu Yimin smashed the pile of food in his hand to the ground, and the milk broke and spilled everywhere. Chu Yimin was furious. I told you I don't eat these things. Look at the production dates on them. They are almost expired. I want fresh ones, fresh ones. Don't you understand? You don't understand what people say, do you? Qin Jin stood behind a group of medical staff, her face full of anger. She lowered her voice and said to Huami, "What kind of weird family is this that can raise something like this? What time is it now? And they're still arguing with us about the expiration date?" Huami also sneered and said to Chu Yimin, "If you have any objections to the food in our quarantine area, then don't come to our Xiangqing base. We don't welcome you here." She pointed in the direction of the gate with her big belly. "See? If you go out from here and walk a distance, you will be able to go to the west of Xiangqing base. This is the only way out of Xiangqing base. Bye-bye." Chu Yimin turned her head and saw Huami with a huge belly. In her mind, she instantly remembered how Huami, with her big belly, wiped out her brother's team. For a moment, Chu Yimin felt a little panicked, but when she thought about it carefully, she realized that she was here on behalf of the Yi City base. She called her brother, and her brother supported her approaching Gong Yi in this way. Her brother also thought of many ways for her and prepared a lot of formal documents, allowing her to represent the Yi City base to discuss cooperation with the Xiangqing base. Today, Chu Yimin is the representative of the management level of the Yi City base. Thinking of this, Chu Yimin suddenly felt confident. She was not afraid of Huami. She said to Huami with contempt, "The food you provided to the survivors is almost out of shelf life. How can we say anything about what you did?" As she said this, her eyes turned to the survivors around her, trying to find someone among these survivors who shares her hatred for the enemy. But wherever she looked, all the survivors either turned their eyes away or lowered their heads. After all, they were all people who had just returned to the Xiangqing base from outside. After being in a dangerous environment for a long time, everyone knows that it doesn't matter if the food is close to the expiration date. Even if it is expired, they will still eat it. Not only do they eat expired food, they have also eaten moldy food. After all, the living environment outside is so harsh. So, why can't we eat this? The materials in Huami's factory have been produced all the time, but there are too many crystals entering the Xiangqing base every day. A large amount of supplies flowed out of the Xiangqing base. At the same time, the Xiangqing base will also obtain various supplies from various other channels. The Xiangqing base is not necessarily the case. All the materials produced in the Huami factory are provided to the survivors. They usually eat the supplies obtained from various channels first. Only when there is really no food would Qin Jin find Qi Chuan and use public funds to buy supplies from him. The supplies that Qi Chuan had were all purchased wholesale from Huami. It changed hands several times, but the price was not expensive. Therefore, few people know that Xiangqing's greatest confidence lies in Huami. Seeing that everyone kept their heads down and didn't speak, Chu Yimin sneered and asked why. "Are you all afraid of retaliation from the powerful people in Xiangqing base? So you all refuse to tell the truth?" Her eyes looked at Huami. It was obvious that the power that Chu Yimin mentioned was referring to Huami. Huami took 2 steps forward, panting slightly, and said to Chu Yimin, "It's not that they are unwilling to tell the truth, but they can't empathize with you, because for them, the supply of materials at Xiangqing base has completely exceeded their expectations. From the beginning to the end, only a rich lady like you would have a problem with the supply of materials to our Xiangqing base. I've also said that if you really have any objections, just leave the Xiangqing base and don't bother to pick a fight with us." After hearing what Huami said, Chu Yimin sneered. She felt that she came to help Xiangqing base, so these people in Xiangqing base should be grateful to her. What's more, we should praise her and curry favor with her. Gong Yi doesn't know her role now. When he finds out, he will definitely scold Huami for her harsh treatment of Chu Yimin. So, Chu Yimin looked at Huami with a frown. "You told me to leave, so I left." Who do you think you are? The Xiangqing base is not yours. Let me tell you, I came here on behalf of the East City base to help your Xiang City base. You drove me away. Did Gong Yi, the garrison commander of the Xiang City base, agree? Huami looked at Chu Yimin's arrogant expression and asked exaggeratedly, No, you always say you are here to help our Xiangqing base. May I ask, how can a small city like Yi help our Xiangqing base? She had never been to East City to see it in person. But according to the standards of establishing a base in the previous life, with such a small piece of land and such a small area in City E, they actually call themselves a base? These people have never seen how big the base is. Huami felt a little embarrassed that Xiangqing now called itself a base. According to the base standards of her previous life, Xiangqing's current area and population could only be considered a small base. It is still a small unfinished base, and even the city walls have not yet completely surrounded the base. Huami is not willing to claim to be the head of the Xiangqing base. So how did the East City, which was said to have only a few barbed wire fences, have the nerve to call itself a base? As a result, Chu Yimin did not hear Huami's sarcasm. She snorted through her nose and noticed everyone's eyes were looking at her. Chu Yimin was quite satisfied. She liked this kind of treatment that was the center of attention. Chu Yimin said to Huami, Everyone knows that your Xiangqing base will soon be devoured by zombies, so there are so many people in your base. You have to find a place to stay. I am here on behalf of the East City base to receive the survivors from you. Did you hear me? She came from the East City base to receive the survivors from the Xiang City base, so everyone should know her identity, Chu Yimin. We should also know how important a role Chu Yimin plays in this. If you are sensible, you should try to curry favor with her. In this way, she could transfer those who curry favor with her to City E in advance. In Chu Yimin's mind, the survivors of Xiangqing base should have been eager to leave Xiangqing base. The East City base is willing to accept them, which is a timely olive branch extended to these people. Looking at Chu Yimin, who seemed so naive for some reason, Huami couldn't help but laugh. She only asked Chu Yimin one question. You keep claiming to be a savior, but you came to my Xiangqing base to find fault. Then let me ask you, has the Xiangqing base been devoured by zombies? You guys have been saying that the Xiangqing base will be destroyed soon. How long have you been saying this? Why hasn't it been destroyed yet? Not only has the Xiangqing base not been surrounded by zombies, there is also no shortage of supplies. In addition, it is difficult for the survivors to leave the Xiangqing base. They must break through the siege from the west of the Xiangqing base and kill countless zombies to leave. The order inside the Xiangqing base is still in good order. The survivors are doing what they usually do. The Xiangqing base, which is said to be very dangerous, is much safer inside than the outside world.
UAMIS Word stampede que Yima.
She was stunned for a long time before she stomped her feet and pointed at Huami. You don't have to sugarcoat things here. I know that your Xiangqing base is about to be destroyed. I am here to help you. I won't talk to you. Call Gong Yi over. Or you can send someone to take me to Gong Yi and I will talk to him. Huami directly refused. Gong Yi is killing zombies in Xiangqing by now, so he has no time to see you. If you have anything, you can tell me or talk to Miss Qin. Anything in Xiangqing base can be decided by the two of us. We are the management of Xiangqing base and have full authority to handle the people and matters in Xiangqing base. Chu Yimin wanted to go to Xiangqing to find Gong Yi, but that was impossible. Not to mention that Gong Yi was outside and didn't know whether he had time to see Chu Yimin. Even if Gong Yi had time to meet Chu Yimin, he would not be able to say a word about the management of the Xiangqing base. Qingjin reached out and pulled Huami's sleeve. She turned sideways and said to Huami, I think Chu Yimin is not here to discuss cooperation at the Xiangqing base. She is here for your husband. Do you understand why Chu Yimin has been making trouble here? Her real intention is not to drink. Huami narrowed her fox eyes, waved her hand, and told Yang Honglin, throw this woman out quickly. Regardless of whether Chu Yimin had ulterior motives or not, Huami felt uncomfortable in her stomach now and just wanted to get rid of Chu Yimin quickly. Huami's stubborn attitude made Chu Yimin feel quite awkward. She said angrily, this Xiangqing base belongs to Gong Yi. Who are you to make the decision on Gong Yi's behalf? You are a pregnant woman about to give birth. What do you know about managing a base? It means I don't know how to manage a base, do you understand? Hwami retorted. So-called knowledge of managing a base means that you must call back a person who is killing zombies in the zombie tide to help you complete this childish and boring task of receiving survivors? The survivors here are all alive and well. What do they want you to accept? If you really want to recruit those survivors to your East City base, then you can go find the survivors and spread the word. During this period, have you dug out a few survivors from your East City base? Chu Xiang provided Xiangqing with a lot of official documents. Proved Chu Yimin's current status as an administrator. She did not attack Hwami, and Hwami was unwilling to take the initiative with her belly bulging. Hwami's words made all the survivors in the quarantine area show subtle expressions. Some of them have been to the East City base. Perhaps East City is really short of people, so they spread the word that the East City base is some kind of Eden for survivors. But according to the feedback from the survivors, the reputation of the East City base gradually became bad. In particular, the fact that the East City base abused survivors has long been widely circulated among the survivors. So for a long time recently, the number of survivors going to the East City base has been decreasing, and many survivors of the East City base have found ways to sneak away, making a big detour and returning to the Xiangqing base. So don't say that City E is helping Xiangqing base and accepting survivors. What a wronged and pitiful thing to say. In fact, the survivors going to City E was exactly what Chu Xiang wanted. City E is in need of laborers to repair the city walls. Of course, the more survivors going to City E, the better. Hwami saw through Chu Xiang and Chu Yimin's little thoughts. She looked at Chu Yimin with great irony, leaving her helpless and furious. I will only provide you with two options. One is to go to the north of the base to find Gong E by yourself. We are not responsible for any safety issues on the way. One is to leave Xiangqing base as soon as possible and go back to where you came from. If you don't leave now, it won't be easy to leave Xiangqing base again. Chu Yimin was so angry at Hwami's tough attitude that her face turned pale. She shouted loudly, I want to see Gong E. I want to see Gong E. I don't believe in this Xiangqing base, and I won't let a pregnant woman like you do whatever you want. She couldn't understand why the Xiangqing base should listen to a woman. Gong E is such a hero. Hasn't he become the garrison commander of Xiangqing base? He has more than 5,000 garrisons under him. Why doesn't he manage the management of Xiangqing base? In the current Xiangqing base, Hwami is the one who makes the decisions on everything. This is pure power. Hwami shook her head, too lazy to get entangled with this rich lady. She just supported her waist and turned to go to the rescue center. Qingjin walked forward with a stern face and said to Chu Yimin in a cold voice, I've told you that Commander Gong is very busy right now. He's busy killing zombies. You can talk to me about all the management matters in the Xiangqing base. I'm telling you very clearly now, since you represent East City, our Xiangqing base will not do anything to you in the base as a courtesy. But if you still want to cause trouble in our Xiangqing, don't blame us for our tough measures. Please leave the Xiangqing base. After saying this, Qingjin also left with his men. Before she left, she said to the medical staff in the quarantine area, everyone in the base should be treated equally. What time is it now? Wasting food is a shameful thing. You can eat it if you want to, but you can't waste food so casually if you don't want to eat it. The doctors nodded. Yang Honglin immediately brought two policemen and stood in front of Chu Yimin. Yang Honglin said to Chu Yimin with a serious face, please settle the cost of the meals provided in our quarantine area. The food at the Xiangqing base is not given to people for free. Everyone needs to use crystal cores to recharge for shopping. Chu Yimin yelled at Yang Honglin angrily, are you blind too? I've already said that I'm here to help your Xiangqing base on behalf of the East City base. I'm here to discuss cooperation. Before she could finish her words, Yang Honglin interrupted her impatiently. Chu Yimin, I've already said that no one can waste food in our Xiangqing base. Every meal you eat here needs to be paid for. Aren't you from the East City base? Let's settle the expenses first. Otherwise, anyone who claims to represent a certain city or a certain base can come to our Xiangqing base to take advantage of us. Will there still be rules and order in our Xiangqing base? This treatment made Chu Yimin furious again. She had long known that these police officers and nurses at the Xiangqing base were worthless. When she first came to Xiangqing base, she was so angry at these people that she began to doubt her life. Now this feeling of being dominated by anger swept over Chu Yimin again. She took out a handful of crystal cores from her pocket and threw them directly at Yang Honglin. "I'll buy you some medicine. You're all a bunch of psychos." Yang Honglin's face turned serious, and he pointed at Chu Yimin. "Miss, I don't think you are here for serious business. You are either here to hook up with rich men or to cause trouble in our Xiangqing base. Hurry up and get out of here." As soon as he finished speaking, 2 policemen came, held Chu Yimin's arms, one on the left and one on the right, dragged this rich girl to the gate of Xiangqing base, and threw her directly out of the iron gate. How could Chu Yimin have ever been treated like this? She was thrown out of the iron gate and was so angry that she almost died. What should I do now? Chu Yimin didn't dare to force the iron gate. After all, the iron gate of Xiangqing base is electrified. Chu Yimin was so angry that she stood outside the iron gate and cursed for a long time. But none of the garrisons at the Xiangqing base paid any attention to her. There was no choice. Chu Yimin still had to enter the Xiangqing base. There was no way she would go back to city like this. She searched her bag and found that there was no teleportation ticket to Xiangqing base. So Chu Yimin could only call the person sent to her by Chu Xiang. She asked Chu Shiheng's people to buy more teleportation tickets from the Xiangqing base and send them to her. Is this possible? After all, the Chu family has many talented people. As a result, when they received Chu Yimin's call, those talented people realized that their Miss Chu had messed up things herself. Now the person has been thrown out of the Xiangqing base. Being thrown out of the Xiangqing base and going out of the isolation area gate, you need to go through a tortuous electric grid road to reach the west of Xiangqing base directly. Chu Shiheng's person on the other end of the phone said hesitantly, "Miss, we don't have any more tickets to Xiangqing base right now. Those teleportation tickets are worth thousands of gold each, but this is an exaggeration. In fact, you can't buy a teleportation ticket even with thousands of gold, because the purchase of transfer tickets is now limited. Since I learned that the group of survivors who left Xiangqing base at the beginning, after suffering a lot outside, would tear up the teleportation tickets and return to Xiangqing base. For the convenience of management, Huami has stopped selling tickets for teleporting back to the Xiangqing base. Now the transfer tickets in Xiangqing are all supplied internally to the garrison, Huami's own people, Yang Honglin's police team, and some medical staff active on the front line. If ordinary survivors want to get a teleportation ticket to Xiangqing base, they have to pay a huge price. And it's getting harder and harder to get. Therefore, Chu Shiheng's people did not have any more tickets to teleport back to Xiangqing base for Miss Chu to waste. Chu Yimin stood outside the iron gate and shouted angrily, "How did you do things? My brother asked you to stay in the Xiangqing base, not for you to enjoy yourself. At this point, you can't even get a few teleportation tickets. No wonder the supplies in our East City base are becoming increasingly scarce." Chu Shiheng's people explained. Now, if you want to transport the supplies in Xiangqing base out of the base, you will have to go through many difficulties. The biggest difficulty is that the survivors have to carry large amounts of supplies and fight their way out of the zombie siege from the west of Xiangqing base. Then go around to the north of Xiangqing base and go to East City base. No matter how much supplies the people who come out carry, it won't be much more. So after delivering supplies to the East City base, they have to return along the original route. It used to be okay when I had a teleportation ticket to Xiangqing base. I could tear up the ticket in an instant and return to the isolation area of Xiangqing base. Go out again to bring the goods back and go the same route to bring the goods. But now there are no teleportation tickets. To enter and exit the Xiangqing base, they must pass through the west of the Xiangqing base and kill all the zombies outside before they can enter the Xiangqing base. This back and forth wastes a lot of time invisibly. According to conservative estimates, it would take at least a week just to enter the Xiangqing base. He also solved a lot of zombies that blocked the way for Xiangqing base. So the people who stayed behind with Chu Xiang were not unwilling to follow Chu Yimin's instructions and do things. Instead, they have to cherish every opportunity to enter and exit Xiangqing. After all, entering the Xiangqing base to bring goods once will waste 72 hours in the isolation and observation areas, especially when the quantity of goods brought each time is not much. But no matter how Chu Shiheng's people explained to Chu Yimin, this young lady just didn't agree with their plan. She had to ask those people to come out from the Xiangqing base quickly to serve her. And we must find a way to get her the teleportation ticket to Xiangqing base. As a last resort, after hanging up the phone with Chu Yimin, Chu Shiheng's people called Chu Xiang at the E-City base and told him about the difficulties they encountered in the Xiangqing base.
Que Xiang Froned Titli.
Then, Chu Xiang called Chu Yimin again and scolded her. Now that you have been thrown out of the Xiangqing base, don't waste your time in the Xiangqing base. It will be 72 hours before you officially enter Xiangqing base. You might as well go straight to the west of Xiangqing base and head to the north of Xiangqing base. But Chu Yimin was very reluctant. Brother, if I go outside the Xiangqing base and take a detour to Xiangqing north, I will encounter many zombies. She was not stupid, and she knew that going through the Xiangqing base would not only be quick, but also extremely safe, and there would be sufficient supplies. And Chu Shiheng's people are protecting him. So Chu Yimin lost her temper on the phone. Brother, doesn't your E-City base need a hero like Gong Yi to protect it? If you don't help me now, how can I persuade Gong Yi to come to our E-City base? Look at the Xiangqing base. It has been such a long time, but it has not been destroyed by zombies yet. It must be Gong Yi and his garrisons who have guarded the Xiangqing base so well. Gong Yi's fighting ability is so strong. In order to win him over, I think any huge price we pay is worth it. Chu Xiang pinched his forehead painfully on the other end of the phone. He thought what Chu Yimin said made a lot of sense. So, Chu Xiang hung up the phone with Chu Yimin and ordered his men in Xiangqing base to take the last few teleportation tickets in their hands out of Xiangqing base. Delivered it to Chu Yimin personally. Chu Yimin was very happy. She immediately tore up the teleportation ticket and flew back to the Xiangqing base. However, this time, before Chu Yimin could get her footing, she was caught by Yang Honglin, who was waiting nearby. Without waiting for Chu Yimin to speak, they threw Chu Yimin out of the iron gate of Xiangqing base. Chu Yimin was so angry that she wanted to kick the iron gate. She shouted at the police inside. What do you mean by this? I have a transfer ticket. Why don't you let me enter the Xiangqing base? Yang Honglin stood inside the iron gate with a gloomy look on his face and said to Chu Yimin, Miss Hua said that no matter whether you have a teleportation ticket or not, we will throw you out as many times as you fly into our Xiangqing base. If you have the ability, tear up all the transmission tickets in your people's hands. After saying this, Yang Honglin signaled to the policeman beside him. Have you seen those people around Chu Yimin? They are all Chu Shiheng's men.
Keep an eye on them.
As soon as they enter the Xiangqing base, throw them all out. Now, not only Chu Yimin was put on the blacklist of Xiangqing base. When they heard what Yang Honglin said, Chu Shiheng's people standing outside the iron gate all looked very unhappy. On the one hand, they looked at Yang Honglin with angry eyes, and on the other hand, they secretly blamed Chu Yimin, the eldest daughter of the Chu family. It was all because Chu Yimin was so willful that she insisted on letting them leave the Xiangqing base to deliver the teleportation tickets. As a result, I exposed myself like this. At this point, how are they going to bring supplies to City E? Not being able to bring supplies is the secondary issue. The main concern is that their families are still being held by Chu Xiang. If they cannot bring supplies back to City E, their families will encounter unexpected events. So who is to blame for all this? It's all Chu Yimin's fault. Apart from blaming Chu Yimin, these people did not dare to openly show disrespect to anyone in the Xiangqing base. Someone whispered in a sarcastic tone, I've already told you not to let us send the delivery ticket out. Not to let us send the delivery ticket out. What kind of temper do you have? One person ruined the entire delivery chain. The voice was very low, but I don't know if it was intentional, but Chu Yimin heard it. Chu Yimin was entangled with Yang Honglin through an iron gate. She asked Yang Honglin to put her in the Xiangqing base immediately. But Yang Honglin ignored her. Chu Yimin took out her cell phone angrily. Okay, wait for me. I'm going to tell my brother to drive all the survivors who came to us from the Xiangqing base out of our E-City base. From now on, RE City Base will no longer accept survivors from your Xiang City Base. She thought that in this way, she could threaten the Xiangqing base. As a result, Yang Honglin spread his hands, indicating that it didn't matter at all. Xiangqing base will never be destroyed. Those survivors who have been deceived by false information will go to E-City Base to seek trouble, and Xiangqing Base will not be able to do anything about it. The legs are on the survivors' bodies. Does Xiangqing Base still care about those survivors? Where will they go after leaving Xiangqing Base? Human beings are inherently selfish. Huami and others have no control over the lives of the survivors in the Xiangqing Base. Why would they care about the survivors who left Xiangqing Base?
Yang Bonglin Ward choqued Kuyima.
She found that in the Xiangqing Base, both the garrison and the police were out of her traditional understanding of public servants. Yang Honglin is a policeman, but he doesn't care about the safety of the survivors in the E-City Base. Is he still qualified to be a policeman? Chu Yimin doesn't believe this. Under the painful gazes of Chu Shiheng's men, Chu Yimin tore off another ticket to teleport back to Xiangqing Base. She passed through the iron gate. Yang Honglin raised his hands helplessly. Two policemen stepped forward, held Chu Yimin's arms, and dragged Chu Yimin out of the Xiangqing Base. Chu Yimin screamed and tried to tear up the teleportation ticket to Xiangqing Base again, but Chu Shiheng's men snatched the ticket away. Just as Chu Yimin was about to lose her temper, her bodyguard reached out and handed her a cell phone. "Miss, this is Commander Chu calling."
Commandez que Yima es broder que Xiang.
Currently, he claims to be the management commander of the E-City Base. Chu Xing learned that in just this short period of time, Chu Yimin had wasted several tickets to Xiangqing Base. He yelled at Chu Yimin on the phone, "Can you pay some attention to reality? The current situation is that neither you nor our people can get a ticket to the Xiangqing Base. Besides, the incident you caused at Xiangqing Base has already put you on Yang Honglin's blacklist. Do you believe it? If you fly into the Xiangqing Base again now, you'll still be thrown out, so stop being so pretentious. There are not many teleportation tickets to Xiangqing Base, and it can be said that it is impossible to get a teleportation ticket to Xiangqing Base. The transfer tickets in these people's hands are just previous stocks, and one less ticket will be given as soon as one is used." As a result, Chu Yimin kept wasting transfer tickets just to save her pride. Chu Xing scolded Chu Yimin, and finally, Chu Xing said harshly, "If you want to go find Gong yourself, then you will be responsible for all the problems that have happened now. Stop harassing my people. The people I left in the Xiangqing Base are still useful. I beg you to use your brain and be more careful. Now is not the time for our Chu family to cover the sky with one hand." Chu Xing finally realized this valuable fact. In the past, the Chu family had endless capital for Chu Yimin to waste. However, as the number of survivors in City E increased, the circulation of supplies in Xiangqing became increasingly difficult. In fact, the abundance of supplies in City E was no longer as abundant as Chu Yimin had imagined. If the material supply to Xiangqing Base was cut off, then its impact is all-round, not only affecting the survival of the survivors in Xiangqing, but also affecting the E-City Base far away. So although Chu Xing still left people in the Xiangqing Base, these people must not be wasted on Chu Yimin. He quickly made a decision for Chu Yimin. Now, those people who are following you and standing outside the Xiangqing Base have already been exposed. Even if they are exposed, let them take you out of the west of the Xiangqing Base and go around to the north of the Xiangqing Base. I have arranged some people there. They will bring you closer to Gong Yi. After saying this, Chu Xing threatened his sister viciously. "You must be obedient. If you don't, I will never care about you again. You've also seen what happened to those helpless women in the E-City Base. I don't think you would want to end up like those women, so just listen to my instructions. There is a phenomenon that is not visible at the Xiangqing Base. But in the E-City Base or other cities, this phenomenon is very common. That is, on the road, you can see ragged women everywhere. They sell their bodies just for a bite to eat to survive. After all, as a weak woman, it is difficult to survive in such a world. There is no job that requires a woman who is weak and frail. For the same food, the Chu family would rather hire strong men who can do more work for them. What's the point of having women? They don't even have the strength. Therefore, the woman who cannot survive can neither travel a long distance to the Xiangqing base in this world, nor can she find a normal job and live well. They can only sell their bodies. As more and more women sell their bodies like this, women's bodies are no longer valuable, which has created a characteristic of E-City. Most of them will be taken advantage of by men for free. Can women in this world find justice for themselves? Is there an arbitration agency in their base that can seek justice for them? This is the common fate that women encounter in all bases now. Chu Yimin also knew that she had once laughed at the depravity of those women, but she had never put herself in their shoes and thought about them. Although they were doing depraved things, how could they avoid being depraved? As long as there was a glimmer of hope for survival, they would not be willing to do such things in exchange for food to survive. What's more, things have come to this point, and sometimes they sell themselves out not just to keep themselves alive. At this time, most women are still raising children. If they themselves don't want to live, do they mean their children won't live either? Listening to Chu Shiheng's harsh words, Chu Yimin was so angry that she wanted to smash the phone. What could she do? She could only follow her brother's instructions and leave from the iron gate of Xiangqing base, escorted by her brother's bodyguards, heading north to Xiangqing base. However, after walking along a tortuous wire road, Chu Yimin soon arrived at the west of Xiangqing base. She looked at the zombies staggering towards her about 10 meters away, screamed, turned her head, and fell to the ground. She cried and shook her head. I don't want to go from Xiangqing base west to Xiangqing base north. This is too horrible. I don't want to see this. I want to go home. I want to go back to E-City. Please call my brother and ask him to find a solution for me. I want to go inside the Xiangqing base and go to the north. So now we have to either find a way to let her go inside the Xiangqing base to meet Gong Yi, or take her back to City Yi. No matter what choice she makes, Chu Yimin will not take the western detour of Xiangqing base. This is too exaggerated, too scary. Why are these zombies so disgusting? They used to be human. Why do these zombies look so disgusting to scare her? Chu Yimin was very angry and very sad. The men escorting her exchanged looks of disgust with each other. At this time, there is still a young lady like Chu Yimin. This young lady has never killed a zombie. Has she never seen a zombie? She is so delicate. She was so frightened that her legs went limp before the zombies even pounced on her. Someone advised Chu Yimin, Miss Chu, the ice hasn't completely thawed yet, and the weather is still a bit cold, so there are only a few zombies coming to the Xiangqing base. When the weather gets hot, more and more zombies will come to the Xiangqing base. We all know this. You can't do this. We have to hurry to the north, otherwise there will be too many zombies, and we will be in danger on the road. Commander Gong is an expert at killing zombies. The bodyguard's words were not very clear, but the implication was already very obvious. Because Gong Yi is very good at killing zombies, if Chu Yimin wants to attract Gong Yi's attention, how can she not kill zombies? Now this delicate little white flower can no longer get the love of men. Chu Yimin had 2 strings of tears on her face. She glared at the man who came to persuade her. She was angry. I said, I don't want to kill zombies, and I don't want to see them. Find a way for me to return to Xiangqing. After she finished speaking, she closed her eyes as if she was angry with the bodyguards. Several men who were killing zombies not far away rolled their eyes when they saw Chu Yimin like this. To be honest, as men, they hate this kind of delicate women. Because in this situation, a delicate woman can provide them with no emotional value or help at all. If they were Gong Yi, they would be blind to like a woman like Chu Yimin. Compared to a delicate young lady like Chu Yimin, Huami was able to kill all of Chun whose killers even with a big belly. At this time, you can get the respect of men. However, Chu Yimin, who suffers from a serious princess syndrome, does not think that she is any worse than Huami. She was always in a bad mood, and the bodyguards had no choice but to deal with the zombies that attacked from outside the Xiangqing base. They called Chu Xing again. Chu Xing was now very annoyed with Chu Yimin. He instructed the bodyguards on the phone, if she doesn't want to go, then let her stay in Xiangqing base west. Let her do whatever she wants. Don't call me about her again. I'm very busy now. Chu Xiang was busy trying to find a way to get supplies out of the Xiangqing base, so how could he have time to care about Chu Yimin's affairs? In East City, Chu Xiang hung up the bodyguard's phone in annoyance and sat back in front of Chen Hu.
Que Xiang siged.
He glanced at Chen Hu opposite him, who was lighting a cigar. So Chu Xiang said unhappily, Boss Chen is still sitting still. My sister is such a useless thing. It seems that she can't bring Gong Yi back. Chen Hu smelled the cigar in his hand and said to Chu Xiang while smoking it, We can't solve the problem you're worried about, but I have some good news that I just sent back. That woman Huami is about to give birth. As for women, in ancient times, giving birth was like taking one foot into the gates of Hades. Although the present era is not the ancient times, it is almost the same as the ancient times. The environment is difficult, even more difficult than in ancient times. So Huami was about to give birth, and she also had 1 foot halfway in the coffin. Chu Xiang calculated the days and said to Chen Hu in a low voice, What a great relationship. This woman didn't give birth earlier or later, but happened to give birth at this time. God is really helping us. You should be able to use the ultimate move you arranged in the Xiangqing base now. Chen Hu smiled and nodded. It's time to let him go. He had been preparing for so long, and those killers in front were just Chen Hu and Huami fighting with each other. The real killer move comes when Huami is giving birth. He just didn't believe that no matter how strong this woman was, he couldn't kill her at the moment of giving birth. Thinking of this, Chen Hu and Chu Xiang looked at each other and burst into laughter. If he fails to kill Huami this time, Chen Hu will have no chance to survive in the apocalypse. Huami in the Xiangqing base is indeed about to give birth. She discovered her water had broken on her way back to the rescue center after she had driven Chu Yimin away. Qinzhen, who was following behind her, was shocked to see a pool of blood under Huami's feet. He only held onto Huami's wrist, and even his breathing quickened.
Me, you.
Qinzhen was too nervous. She wasn't even this nervous when she gave birth herself. Instead, it was Huami who comforted Qinzhen. Don't panic, call Dr. Xian and ask Dr. Xian to come over. Huami stood there motionless. At this moment, her stomach was as hard as a rock, and the amniotic fluid flowed down like a flood. She just stood there, waiting for Qinzhen to call someone over to her. It was at this time that Huami saw a group of suspicious men walking around outside the rescue center, out of the corner of her eye. Huami was cautious. She placed her hands on her belly and rubbed it slowly to soothe the violent contractions. She frowned slightly, endured the pain, and murmured to the 2 babies in her belly, Relax, come out one by one. It's okay. Mom won't let anyone hurt you. Relax a little. A man walked over, but Huami didn't move. She quickly glanced at the group of suspicious people wandering outside the rescue center. Inside the rescue center, Xian Qiru, Tu Lijia, and Kuming Hong hurried out. Tu Lijia grabbed an unused pulley bed on the way. She dragged the hospital bed and shouted loudly to Huami from a distance. Ami, here I come. The pulley rubbed against the ground, making a clanging sound, and Tu Lijia flew over. Huami stood there motionless. She turned her head and saw a man in the corner with 2 guns in his hands. The black muzzle of the gun was pointed at her. At this moment, Huami leaned back, pulled out a machine gun from behind, pointed it at the opposite side, and started shooting without saying a word. While firing, Huami shouted loudly, Everyone, please get out of my way. I'm giving birth today. Whoever stands in my way of giving birth will die without a burial place. If you don't get out of the way and get hit by a stray bullet, it's not my fault. It was already this late. Huami didn't care about hurting innocent people or not. She just started shooting indiscriminately. Please, she is about to have a baby who has time to carefully aim at the target group. Anyway, she is blind and has walked into her trap, so it is not her fault. Gunshots rang out, and several men who rushed over fell to the ground. At this time, Tu Lijia was frightened by Huami's bullet. She squatted on the ground and hugged her head reflexively. The next moment, Xian Qiru reacted and grabbed Tu Lijia, who was also squatting on the ground with her head in her hands, and crawled towards Huami. The hospital bed on wheels slid across the floor. At this moment, a group of men rushed out from behind them. Huami's machine gun swept over, and someone cursed, "If you shoot, aim at people. I'm just an innocent passerby." Huami's legs were covered with amniotic fluid. She apologized as she fired, "I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry if you die. Please move aside. I'm giving birth today. My water has broken. I can't care whether to aim or not." Of course, those who heard her words dodged as soon as possible if they could. It's no use getting angry. Can you reason with Huami, a shrew? At this point, there is no point in reasoning. There is no way. People are afraid of death. If they lose their life or get shot while watching the fun, it is not worth it. Chiru was really impressed by Huami. She had heard Huami say a long time ago that even when she was giving birth, she could fight at the same time. But she didn't expect that what Huami said was true. Braving the hail of bullets, Chiru and Tulija dragged the wheelbarrow behind Huami. Chiru shouted loudly behind Huami, "Ami, hurry up, it's time to give birth to the baby." Huami sat on the wheeled bed while firing a gun. Their hospital bed on wheels slid all the way to the emergency area, while killers kept rushing out from behind them. Those killers all had heavy firepower in their hands. Huami cursed inwardly, sat on the hospital bed, turned around, and swept around with the machine gun again. With such heavy firepower, why don't these rascals go out and kill zombies? If they could use this firepower to go out and kill zombies, the siege problem of Xiangqing Base would have been solved long ago. So, it's not that humans are incapable of defeating zombies. Zombies are not an insurmountable obstacle for today's survivors. The problems these people are facing now are all caused by human beings themselves. They created many obstacles for themselves. Let the end of the world finally become the end of the world. Chiru shook her head and sighed. As the bullet whizzed past her scalp, she and Tulija pushed Huami's bed together and quickly slid towards the emergency area. Kuminghong finally arrived. He bent over, hid himself beside the bed, and helped push the bed. On the hospital bed, the amniotic fluid flowing out of Huami's stomach had dyed half of the bed red. She looked down and asked loudly, "Dr. Xian, how am I?" Chiru stretched out a hand, touched Huami's big belly, and said in the hail of bullets, "Very good. The baby's head has entered the pelvis. You can give birth to it." Huami finally felt relieved. She endured the severe pain and still held the machine gun, sweeping here and there. Anyone who stops her from giving birth will die. At the same time, Chao Feng received news that Sister Hua was about to give birth. Those stationed in Xiangqing already had a huge plan. When their commander was unable to spare the time to accompany Sister Hua during childbirth, these garrisons had to take special shifts to accompany Sister Hua during her delivery. Sister Hua may not give birth to a child on any particular day, but every day, she has different people on standby. Today it is Chao Feng's turn. Chao Feng immediately took the camera, the beautiful little dresses he had prepared for the two babies, and the meeting letters he had written to the babies, and prepared to accompany Sister Hua to give birth. As a result, he was just about to rush back to the emergency area from the west of Xiangqing Base. Suddenly, a group of survivors rushed out from the west of Xiangqing Base. The group of survivors held grenades in their hands and threw them one by one, hitting the electric fence. With a crackling sound, a burst of sparks and lightning, the power grid was scrapped. Chao Feng looked at this group of lunatics in disbelief. He shouted at them loudly, "Why don't you use your grenades to fight zombies? But our power grid? It's unbelievable." Because of the destruction of the power grid, zombies swarmed in, and the survivors nearby were busy killing the zombies. But a few zombies still managed to break through the first electric fence and enter the second one. At this moment, an ominous premonition swept over Chao Feng's heart. He hurried forward, killing the zombies and the group of survivors who rushed out to cause trouble. Before he finished killing the troublesome survivors, another survivor, with explosives tied all over his body, rushed towards the second electric fence. He was shouting, "I didn't mean to do this. If I don't do this, my wife and children will die." "Aw!" Chao Feng shouted. "What are you doing?" An explosion sounded, and another hole was blown in the second electric grid. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Chow Feng immediately blew the whistle in his hand, summoning all the survivors and garrisons to guard the power grid. Originally, the western city wall of the Xiangqing base had not been repaired. In front of the unfinished city wall, the contractor built more than a dozen electric grids at Hua Mi's instruction. Now, because of these crazy survivors, the second power grid has been completely destroyed. Although there were not many zombies in front of the second electric fence, Chow Feng was sharp-eyed and saw a man with explosives tied all over his body rushing directly towards the third electric fence. Chow Feng quickly raised the gun in his hand and fired at the survivor, who was covered in explosives. This survivor, whose body was covered with explosives, fell in front of Chow Feng. But at the moment he fell, the third electric fence had been blown up by troublemakers from another direction. Chow Feng looked back in shock, only to see survivors coming from different directions, covered in explosives. Some have already passed through the third electric fence and fallen on top of the fourth one. He felt that these people were extremely crazy. Did the Xiangqing base dig up their ancestral graves, or did it make them die? Why did these people continue to do such a thing that harmed others and did not benefit themselves? The garrison in the west of Xiangqing was assembled and quickly captured the troublemakers who rushed towards the power grid. On the other side, the ordinary survivors who were stunned by this sudden change had never expected that the Xiangqing base could actually have its fifth power grid blown up by humans. These power grids are like this. Once a hole is blown, the protection of the entire power grid will be rendered useless.
Why?
Why is this happening? Why is this? Chow Feng had just restrained these troublemakers who were making trouble one after another. There were ordinary survivors over there, shouting loudly, "Zombies are coming! Zombies are coming!" He looked up and, sure enough, he saw a large group of zombies on the other side of the horizon. Because of the changes in the west of Xiangqing base, many ordinary survivors were originally killing zombies outside. As a result, some were injured by the bombs, while others did not want to get involved and directly left the west of Xiangqing base. This resulted in the complete loss of the zombie defense line west of the Xiangqing base. By the time Chow Feng's garrison had time to spare, the zombies, like a tide, had already approached the west of Xiangqing. And these zombies directly pushed down the first barbed wire fence that had lost its power. They seemed to have received divine help and directly crushed several barbed wire fences. Chow Feng looked at the dark mass of zombies, cursed inwardly, and looked down at the gift prepared for the babies in his bag. After all, there is no way to record the baby's birth. His eyes were red, and he put down the gift in his hand and carefully placed it on the side of the road. He then took out a handful of energy water drops from his combat waste bag. Chow Feng shouted, "Brothers, today's incident is that our Xiangqing base was ambushed, but it is also a time to test our combat effectiveness. You raise soldiers for 1,000 days and use them for a moment. At this time, there is no need to cherish your life." After he finished speaking, he held the energy water drop in one hand and a machine gun in the other and rushed into the zombie tide. Behind Chow Feng, the garrison shot those men who were causing trouble to death. Without any hesitation, they followed Chow Feng and charged into the zombie tide. There are 3 power grids left, and these 3 power grids must be defended at all costs. We must defend them all. We must defend it even if we die. The foreman who was working at the construction site was looking anxiously at the wave of zombies 100 meters away. He turned around and looked at the city wall that was only a few meters high. The contractor was in a hurry, looking for Hu Jing on the construction site. Have to go. We have to leave quickly." At this time, Hu Jing was carrying a bag of cement and walking through the crowd. The men and women on the construction site had almost all run away. There was no way. There were simply too many zombies approaching them. It would be abnormal if they didn't run away. At this time, the first reaction is to run away, which is human nature. Hu Jing was the only one on the entire construction site, laboriously carrying cement. His forehead was covered with sweat. He was carrying cement and roaring, hurry up, and build the wall. It's only 2 or 3 meters high. What are you thinking about? Don't move." However, no matter how he shouted, The survivors standing there looked hesitant. Run. If they don't run now, they will all die in the zombie tide. How long can Chao Feng hold out against so many zombies? What's more, there are not many garrisons west of Xiangqing Base, only about 1,000 or 2,000 people at most. However, these 1,000 or 2,000 garrisons have to guard the entire western side of Xiangqing. Even though they have built a 2 or 3 meter high wall here, in fact, there are still many places that are completely empty. The cement hasn't even been mixed yet. There are only 3 power grids left. How can we defend them? If I don't run, I'm really going to die, because of their hesitation. The workers on the construction site just watched Hu Jing, who was hurriedly carrying cement. Hu Jing roared for a while, and finally, he laughed miserably. He stopped shouting, saving some energy to carry the cement. At this moment, the contractor ran over and grabbed Hu Jing by the collar. Hurry up, leave here quickly, I'll do it. After saying that, the contractor grabbed the cement from Hu Jing's back, put it on his shoulders, and ran away. Hu Jing was stunned for a moment, then he reacted, picked up another bag of cement, and ran after the contractor. Hu Jing was carrying cement and asked curiously, "Uncle, why don't you run?" "I ran away. Miss Hua, after giving birth, won't she be angry?" Mr. Bao rolled his eyes at Hu Jing. He is Miss Hua's #1 lackey. The so-called #1 lackey must be the one that Miss Hua worries about and Miss Hua is happy about. Although the contractor was scared to death, he knew that the ultimate act of being a lackey was to risk his own life to please his master. The #1 lackey contractor grinned at Hu Jing and said, "Don't worry, after this incident, Miss Hua will definitely pay more attention to me." Hu Jing followed the contractor, unloaded the cement, and then ran back behind the contractor to fetch water. He asked, "What if you die?" "If you die, it will be useless no matter how much Miss Hua values you." The contractor rolled his eyes at Hu Jing again. He made the sign of the cross on his chest and put his hands together while running. "How could I die? I have Miss Hua to protect me." After saying this, he proudly pulled out a gold necklace from around his neck. The pendant of the gold necklace is a palm-sized disc, on which is inlaid a portrait of Hua Mi. This is the contractor's amulet. He raised the palm-sized gold pendant towards Hu Jing.
"See?
Miss Hua will protect me. I will definitely not die. As for you, you don't have Miss Hua's magical power to protect you. This dangerous place is not suitable for you. You should leave quickly." Hu Jing was simply speechless at the contractor's insane and servile behavior. He no longer communicated with the contractor and just kept on carrying cement. After all, the contractor's thoughts are beyond the understanding of a normal person's logic. When a person becomes extremely servile, he becomes like a contractor. He is not trying to curry favor with Hua Mi at all. He simply regards Hua Mi as his life belief. At this time, the women standing nearby also moved. They originally wanted to leave Xiangqing Base and head west. But they looked at Chao Feng and others who were wearing garrison combat uniforms and had been staying outside the third line of defense. Hu Jing and the contractor had been carrying dozens of bags of cement back and forth. Some women just can't move and leave. So they took the initiative to join Hu Jing and Chao Feng's team carrying cement. "Let's build the city wall. Let's build it. Anyway, if the western part of Xiangqing Base is breached, their fate will be death. If we retreat further, where can we retreat to? If we retreat to the Xiangqing Base, will the zombies not be able to attack the Xiangqing Base? Someone has to build the wall. Someone has to guard the western part of Xiangqing Base." Some other men who were building the city wall and were about to leave watched the women on the construction site move. Those men couldn't help but spit on the ground. Someone was puzzled and grabbed a woman's arm and asked, "Why are you still carrying cement here at this time, and why don't you run away?" The woman pushed the man away and laughed bitterly. "Of course you can run away. Once you leave the base, you can go to the East City Base, F City, or anywhere else you want. But we only have Xiangqing Base left, understand? Only Xiangqing Base is left. Don't think that just because they have been staying in the Xiangqing Base, they don't know how broken the lives of the women outside are. They clearly understood what fate they would face after leaving the Xiangqing Base. If they defend the Xiangqing Base today, they can still live like human beings. If they fail to defend the Xiangqing Base, they will perish along with the Xiangqing Base. Anyway, the fate of the women who leave here is worse than death. It is better to use this life and contribute a little of your own strength. Maybe because of your strength, Xiangqing will have a better chance of survival. The women began to move. A child was crying on the construction site. A woman took off her protective gloves and wiped the tears from the child's face. She said gently to the frightened child, "Don't cry. Go to work. You are with your mother." The child stretched out his tender, dirty hands and hugged his mother's neck. He cried and asked, "Mom, if we don't run away, will we be eaten by these zombies?" The gentle woman smiled, held the child's hand, and stuffed a brick into the child's hand, deceiving her child. "If you stack the bricks high enough, you and Mom will be able to live well. Don't worry, Mom will never lie to you." All she had left was herself and her child's life. If they leave Xiangqing, neither she nor her children will survive. So don't think about anything and don't feel afraid. The only thing they had to do was to build the city wall high enough before the zombies ate Chao Feng's garrisons. There are still many people who understand this truth. Some women ran halfway, figured it out, and then ran back with their children. The construction site gradually became busy again. This time they were much faster, and there was no need for the contractor and Hu Jing to make any arrangements. They just did everything they could within their sight. Chao Feng bravely killed zombies outside the power grid. Construction on the city wall behind him gradually resumed. Although the construction speed was not as fast as before, the city wall project was slowly moving forward. Sometimes people's psychology is like this. When you are working hard, everyone around you gives up. I feel that there is no point in struggling. I feel like a big idiot. I wish I could just give up like everyone else. But when the people around you work hard with you, you will feel a sense of strength in your heart, and everyone is working together for the same goal. This is very exciting. At this time, whether it was Chao Feng, the garrisons, the contractor, or Hu Jing and others, everyone is becoming more and more motivated. The remaining people were united as one at this time. Others who withdrew from the Xiangqing West City Wall project have fled to the quarantine area. Yang Honglin brought the police to guard the isolation area here. He had received news that Huami was giving birth in the emergency area. 7 of the 10 power grids in western Xiangqing have been destroyed. If Chao Feng's human wall cannot be held, the quarantine area will be in danger. Yang Honglin and other police officers are fully armed. He said to those kids from the police academy, "All of you move back and stand behind our old policeman." As a policeman, at this time, Yang Honglin could not possibly persuade those children from the police academy to take off their police uniforms and retreat to the observation area. Garrisoning is their first line of defense, so they, as police officers, are the second line of defense for the survivors. No matter which line of defense you are on, you cannot retreat. But none of the kids from the police academy listened to Yang Honglin's words. There was even a kid from a police academy who took the initiative to stand in front of Yang Honglin. He turned around and said to Yang Honglin, "Captain Yang, you are old and can't move anymore. Let us do the physical work of killing zombies." However, before he could finish his words, someone suddenly ran out from the survivors who had retreated into the quarantine zone and threw a bomb at the child's feet. Yang Honglin was quick-witted and kicked the bomb back. The bomb exploded in the air, and the entire quarantine area seemed to shake. At this time, the other survivors in the quarantine area ran around in panic, screaming and rushing towards the observation area. Yang Honglin shouted loudly, don't move," before he could finish his words. He saw a woman holding a gun and firing several shots at Yang Honglin's police academy students. Yang Honglin's eyes were red with anger. Why did this happen? They are all ready to use their lives to fight the zombies. Why would the survivors shoot at them? Their enemies have never been humans themselves. Yang Honglin couldn't figure it out. Those who attacked Yang Honglin and his fellow police academy students thought that they had finally gotten rid of Yang Honglin and his fellow police officers. As a result, Yang Honglin and those kids from the police academy lowered their heads as if nothing had happened, looking at their police uniforms which were riddled with bullet holes. It was so embarrassing. The police officers were wearing bulletproof vests provided by Miss Hua. The woman who shot Yang Honglin was killed by the police academy student in front of Yang Honglin the next moment. Those children screamed and aimed their guns at the survivors. This time, the gun-wielding survivors did not attack the police. They made a point of killing ordinary survivors around them. Everyone has only one skin. Just by looking at the skin, who can tell whether it is a human or a ghost? Soon, ordinary survivors who had no protection were shot to death. Yang Honglin quickly led the team to counterattack, killing the troublemakers one after another. However, the entire isolation and observation area was in chaos. Everyone rushed madly into the Xiangqing base. The remaining police officers rushed over and blocked the gate leading to the Xiangqing base. An anxious look flashed across Yang Honglin's face. If anyone here has a fever, you cannot enter the Xiangqing base. Don't make any noise. Don't make any noise. Some of the survivors turned around and shouted at Yang Honglin, "Are you crazy? Someone is shooting randomly in the quarantine and observation areas. Are you blind and don't see it? Do you want us to stay here and be killed?" The order was so chaotic that Yang Honglin shot and killed the man in front of him who tried to attack him. He stepped forward and fired a shot into the sky. With a sound, the gunshot echoed in the sky. Yang Honglin said to the survivors who were trying to rush into the base, "We exist to maintain order, especially when we don't know how many troublemakers there are among you. We won't let anyone enter the Xiangqing base." As soon as he finished speaking, the policemen on the road leading to the interior of the Xiangqing base raised their guns and picked up their shields. Everyone lined up in a line to prevent the survivors from moving into the Xiangqing base. Chaos, chaos. The more times like this happen, the more impossible it is for them to let go of any turbulence and enter the Xiangqing base. No matter how these survivors curse or cry. Yang Honglin said that if he didn't let anyone go, no one would be let in. Yang Honglin was surrounded by a group of survivors. A survivor rushed forward and punched Yang Honglin in the face. Yang Honglin grabbed the survivor's fist with one hand and twisted it with his backhand. He glared at the survivor who attacked him and said, "If you have any resentment in your heart, then use it to kill zombies, or look carefully to see if there is anyone among you who wants to take advantage of the chaos to enter the Xiangqing base and plant a bomb. Don't vent your anger on me. I am not your enemy. I never have been. I am responsible for the majority of the survivors in Xiangqing base." As soon as he finished speaking, a group of people suddenly rushed out from the Xiangqing base. The group of people were holding bombs. At this moment, the police academy students under Yang Honglin were the first to discover this group of people. The group of children yelled, turned around, and hugged the people who had bombs hidden on their bodies. The accident happened at this moment. Someone pulled the protective pin of the bomb on his body and blew away several children from the police academy. Of course, they themselves were blown to pieces. Looking at those living lives falling in front of him like pieces of rags, Yang Honglin was furious. He ordered the remaining old policemen, "Follow my orders. Anyone who forcibly rushes into the base will be killed. All of them will be killed." What vibrant lives! A second ago, they were shouting at Yang Honglin, protesting that he still treated them as children. The next second, Yang Honglin looked at the child who fell in front of him, his face covered with bruises from the explosion. His eyes were red. Medical staff rushed over and poured energy drops on the police academy kids. Whether it can be saved is another matter. Let's water it with energy drops first. Hold on. Anyone who tries to attack our defense line again will be killed. Yang Honglin opened fire and blew off a survivor's head with one shot. He doesn't care whether this person is innocent or not. He doesn't care. They have no control over other places, but this road leading to the Xiangqing base. Yang Honglin will not let anyone in. Chao Feng has Chao Feng's tasks, and Yang Honglin must also stick to his post. Only when everyone sticks to his or her own post can the rules and order be maintained. The police inside the Xiangqing base sounded the air raid alarm. They called on everyone in the Xiangqing base to stay in their rooms and not go out, or go out of town and kill zombies. At this moment, it has reached a critical moment, and the opponent is obviously making a final fight. At this time in the rescue center, Huami's wheeled bed had already arrived outside the emergency area. There were corpses all along the way. Xian Qiru looked at Huami, whose face was pale. She pushed the bed and asked, "What should we do? What should we do?" There were so many killers besieging Huami that Xian Chiru couldn't imagine what Huami should do to give birth to the child at this time. Huami was not in a hurry, as she had used up all the Gatling bullets in her hand. So she took out a Gatling gun. At this time, she no longer cared whether her warehouse was exposed or not. They just kept firing all the way forward, regardless of whether there were people in front of them or not. In an emergency, Huami would use bullets to clear a path. So, except for the killers lying on both sides of the bed, no one dared to block Huami's way to the emergency area. Taligia shouted loudly, "They will definitely not give up. Should we notify Commander Gong?" It was at this time that Gong Yi's call reached Huami. Huami answered the phone. She held the Gatling gun in one hand and the phone in the other. She shouted into the phone in a rough voice, "What are you doing?" "I'm busy giving birth here." Early this morning, the number of zombies coming to the north of Xiangqing base suddenly increased several times more than before. With one hand, he pointed at the zombies in front of him, using his mental power to control them to approach the north of Xiangqing base. With the other hand, he held his phone and said with a frown, "How are things going over there? I'll be back right away." At this time, Gong Yi was also anxious. He hated himself. Why was he so far away from the emergency area? His mental power can only control all the zombies within a range of 800 meters. If he leaves the north of Xiangqing base, those zombies like a tide will soon sweep into the north of Xiangqing base, which has no protection at all. Gong Yi was extremely anxious. He shouted loudly to Huami on the phone, "Find a safe place to give birth. Don't be in the emergency area. This is an organized conspiracy. They will not stop until they destroy the Xiangqing base." Huami had a terrible stomachache. She was half lying on the hospital bed and was pushed by Xian Chiru, Tu Lijia, and Kuming Hong to the emergency area of the Xiangqing base. A hospital bed on wheels was used to move the three of them at the speed of a racing car. Huami yelled at Gong Yi, "It's too late. I'm leaving now. Just guard your Xiangqing base in the north. That's all. Why are you calling me? After the baby is born, you won't be prevented from seeing it. You will see it sooner or later. Why are you in such a hurry?" Huami was annoyed and hung up the phone. At times like this, she would be impatient to whine to a man. She was busy killing people and giving birth to children, so she had no time to take care of Gong Yi's emotions. Besides, we really can't leave because Ikegawa and Afu's supplies are not coming in on time. Huami went to the Lotus supermarket to give birth to her baby. What should we do with all the garrisons here? They need a wall. After the call was hung up, Gong Yi looked angrily at the tide of zombies across the street, which was so dark that there was no end in sight. It was these zombies that held him back. His wife is giving birth in the emergency room, and there are countless killers chasing his wife, but Gong Yi can do nothing now. Why can't he do anything? His wife is so pregnant and works so hard every day. Not only could he not help Huami in any way, but his wife and children were now in danger, and he was still here killing zombies. Gong Yi suddenly felt a hatred for himself. He was already tired of this feeling of powerlessness, always walking on the edge of powerlessness. Because of his incompetence, he is now in a very passive situation. When a person, especially a man, falls into such emotions, the situation is very bad. Tang Yu shouted loudly beside Gong Yi, "Commander!" Commander Gong Yi didn't answer him. In the eyes of all the garrisons in the north of Xiangqing base, they only saw a force transformed into substance pouring out from Gong Yi's body. The energy crystal bead in his hand quickly melted into his body. Tang Yu was almost stunned. He looked at this strange scene in shock. The power that had turned into substance and was like mist poured out from Gong Yi's body and transformed into a city wall in the air. A wall made of white fog. This city wall blocks the entire northern part of Xiangqing base. All the zombies that crashed into the foggy wall were turned into nothing. Their bodies turned into powder, and bright crystal cores flickered in the sand like powder. The Xiangqing North line was paved. The sweeping robot in the distance was sweeping happily under the feet of the zombies. The powder is cleaned up by the sweeping robot, sent to the garbage station, and converted into energy. The sweeping robots collected these crystal cores and stored them in Hwami's warehouse. Zombies kept coming south from the north. Those zombies had no consciousness of their own. They pounced on the wall made of clouds and mist, turning a blind eye to the fate of their predecessors who turned into dust. At this time, these zombies only had the most primitive hunting desire left. They wanted to go south and destroy the Xiangqing base. However, no matter how many of them came, they were turned into powder when they encountered the wall of clouds and mist. Tang Yu looked at the magical scene in front of him in amazement, as if he saw some supernatural power. In an instant, I felt like I had fallen from the real world into a fantasy world. Before this, Tang Yu knew that their commander was a person with special abilities. But before this, the most Gong Yi could do was to act like an infrared scanner and see all the scenery within a range of 800 meters. They all said that the commander was a psychic, the most powerful psychic in the apocalypse. He is also the only psychic discovered in the Xiangqing base. But no one knows how powerful this psychic can be. When Tang Yu and others were stationed there, they only thought that this mental power was only slightly stronger than the strength power. Even with Gong Yi's current strength, he is not as strong as Lu Xingyuan, the strongest mutant in Xiangqing base. But now, when he saw with his own eyes that Gong Yi's power was materialized, Tang Yu truly believed that this mental power was a type of power that was several times more powerful than ordinary powers. Gong Yi's mental power was materialized. This is already outrageous, because this means that as long as Gong Yi wants, everything in his head can be realized. Sure enough, Gong Yi stood behind the wall made of clouds and mist. His hands formed into claws and ordered Tang Yu, "Give me all the energy water drops, energy water beads, and energy crystal beads you have." The powerful output of mental power has made Gong Yi realize that the energy in his body is beginning to run out. This is a very bad phenomenon. Gong Yi's eyes were filled with misty spiritual power, making it impossible to see his true eye color. His temple began to throb, and his head began to ache like a piercing pain. He was very anxious and eager to get rid of the zombies in Xiangqing so that he could go back to accompany his wife and give birth to a child. Tang Yu hurriedly mobilized all the garrisons in the north of Xiangqing, and they took out all the energy water beads and energy crystal beads on their bodies. The towering wall of clouds and mist in front of us grew higher and gradually solidified. Mountains and seas of zombies were still coming down from the north, but they were no longer able to cross the city wall and harm the garrisons and survivors inside. Gong Yi retreated step by step, and soon, the basket of energy water beads and energy crystal beads had been used up by him. The huge output of mental power requires the absorption of huge energy. Upon seeing this, Tang Yu hurriedly ordered the idle garrisons to quickly fetch the energy water beads and energy crystal beads for the commander and find a way to mobilize these things. Hurry up, hurry up. All the garrisons were mobilized, and at this time, Qi Chuan was dragging a cart of energy water beads and other things, rushing towards the north of Xiangqing. The accidents that occurred in Xiangqing West and Xiangqing North kept Qi Chuan and his friends busy. Ikegawa was driving fast on the road. A cordon suddenly appeared in front of them. Qi Chuan cursed and continued driving without slowing down. He had no intention of stopping the car, but when he was about to cross the cordon, Qi Chuan's heart moved, and he turned the car to the side. A bomb brushed past his car, landed on the road, and exploded instantly. The front of Ikegawa's car hit a building nearby. The building was made of cement from Hwami's factory. There was nothing wrong with the building, but the front of Ikegawa's car was flattened. Hot blood slowly flowed from his forehead. Qi Chuan, who was leaning on the steering wheel, shook his head and saw a group of men rushing out from the explosion. The men were holding weapons and seemed to be planning to rob Ikegawa's car. How could this be tolerated? Qi Chuan opened the car door, pulled out a machine gun, and fired at the group of men. His face was covered in blood, and his head was dizzy. The red blood mist made it impossible for him to see clearly who was in front of him. But at this time, Qi Chuan had only one thought in his mind. That is, he wanted to deliver the goods to Xiangqing. He knew that the situation in the north of Xiangqing was extremely urgent, and the garrison there needed energy crystal beads. It was estimated that the group of people who robbed Chichuan did not expect that Chichuan had heavy firepower such as machine guns in his hands. Several of them died, and the remaining group found a shelter to hide. Someone shouted to Chichuan, "I say, Chichuan, why do you work so hard for a woman? There is a car of energy drops behind you, right? Let's take this car of energy drops away. From now on, wherever the end of the world is, it will be our world. You can live your life freely and don't have to listen to a woman's orders." Everyone knows that now in the Xiangqing base, Chichuan and his friends are responsible for transporting supplies. If the Chichuan supply line is cut off, no matter how powerful the garrison and police at the Xiangqing base are, their energy will eventually run out. Ikuoa ignored these people. He dragged his machine gun and staggered beside his truck. He sneered, "What future do I have if I follow you guys? Since the first day of the apocalypse, I have been following Miss Hua to enjoy delicious food and drinks. What's the point of living with you in this apocalypse? Any intelligent person would know where to line up, right? It's just that people like you are stupid. You will work hard for others, but when you are too full, you will complain that your life is too long." These words successfully angered the group of people who came to rob. Of course they know that their lives are not easy. If their lives were good, why would they work so hard for Chern Hu and do such a risky job? If they had as good luck as a Kegwa, they would be able to meet a wealthy woman like Huami who had hoarded large quantities of supplies from the very beginning. They don't have to be here anymore. But now that things have come to this, what can they do? Their families are still in the hands of Chern Hu. If they don't come to rob Chichuan, none of their family members will survive. People hiding behind barriers, whispering, "I don't think there's any need to go on. Although he has a machine gun, he's alone. We do this. The person behind the barrier made several gestures. Everyone nodded silently and began to move their positions, trying to surround Akegawa. But how could Chichuan be so easy to manipulate? I don't know why. Maybe he soaked in the energy water beads provided by Huami all day long, absorbing the energy in the energy water beads when he was hungry or thirsty. So his ears became unusually sensitive. Even though his eyes were blurred by the blood flowing from his head, Akegawa could still hear it if the people around him moved slightly. He raised the gun in his hand, his face covered in blood, closed his eyes and fired several shots at the sound of movement. Successfully killed a few more people. Someone yelled, "Are you a human or a ghost? How can you be so rebellious?" Even though they had so many people and Akegawa was seriously injured, it was actually very difficult for them to take down this carload of energy drops. Someone didn't believe it and quietly approached Chichuan with a stick in his hand. But he had just popped his head out when Ikuwa suddenly turned around and was hit by the machine gun in his hand. At this time, several large trucks slowly drove up the street. They were the friends driving behind on the Chichuan transport line. One friend was driving the car and the other was sitting in the passenger seat. Having received the news in advance, every one of them knew that it would be extremely dangerous to travel on the road at this time. So they put a machine gun on the passenger seat. Before they got close to Chichuan, they started shooting at the group of people who were besieging Chichuan. After a while, the group that tried to rob Ikuwa was killed. The garbage truck slowly drove over and cleaned up the bodies on the ground one by one. One of the guys stopped the car and jumped out. He looked at Chichuan, whose head was covered in blood, with a worried look on his face and asked, "Chuanzi, how are you?" Ikuwa put down the gun, lowered his head, and wiped the blood off his face with his clothes. He opened his eyes and said, "It's okay, keep driving and hurry up to deliver the goods." He said it nonchalantly, and as he said it, blood kept spurting out of his head. But Ikuwa doesn't think it's a big problem. If he felt he had no strength left, he would turn around and take out a bottle of energy water drops from the car and chug it down like drinking water. After drinking it, he threw the bottle away and the truck continued to drive fast. Seeing his friends like this, I feel relieved even though I am worried. They drove trucks through the streets and alleys of Xiangqing. Some went to the north of Xiangqing and some went to the west of Xiangqing. As long as their material transportation routes were uninterrupted, the garrisons in the north and west of Xiangqing could hold out. At this time, Afu's family also received the news. They hurriedly closed down the largest wholesale market for supplies in Xiangqing. The survivors who were selling supplies in the market were not happy. They shouted at the top of their lungs, "Hey, how can you be like this? Don't you know that supplies outside Xiangqing are already very scarce? You have closed the supply market. Where can we buy supplies?" Yi Rong glanced at the disgruntled survivors in front of her and sneered, "You're still sending supplies outside Xiangqing? Don't you know that Xiangqing is at a critical moment of life and death? I'm telling you, Xiangqing is running low on supplies. So, you guys better leave now. If you don't leave, I'll chase you away with a broom." After saying that, Yi Rong actually took out a broom. Her husband, Ah Fu, who was standing beside her, was no less anxious. He turned around and looked for the dustpan that came with the broom. Ah Fu thinks this can also be used to hit people. When the survivors who were preparing to take the goods out of Xiangqing saw this, some of them slammed the table and yelled at Yi Rong, "What do you mean by shortage of supplies? I see there are still so many supplies in the supply market behind you. Just try to close the supply market. It's just a broom and a dustpan. Don't be funny. These things have no killing power in the apocalypse." However, before he could finish his words, Dafu and Xiaofu appeared at the teleportation point behind Yi Rong. The two kids each had a Gatling gun on their backs. They pointed the guns at the group of disgruntled survivors on the opposite side. "Are you leaving or not? Are you leaving or not? If you don't leave, we will shoot. Hurry up." These days, Dafu and Xiaofu sometimes help their parents with some chores at the material market at the Xiangqing base. But more often, the two of them were in the quarantine area of City D, killing zombies with Guisei. Because they kill zombies day and night, these two children naturally have a murderous aura on their bodies. Besides, Dafu has reached the age where he will be stationed soon. At this time, Dafu would naturally not let these survivors cause trouble in the supplies market. The group of survivors who were going to bring goods were cursing. But there was no way. Their momentum was not as strong as the two children. Under Gatling's threat, they dared not move forward even if they did not want to retreat. So Dafu and Xiaofu, holding Gatling guns in their hands, moved forward step by step. The survivors who were blocking Yi Rong and Ah Fu also retreated step by step. Eventually, they withdrew from the supplies market. Dafu and Xiaofu pulled down the shutter of the commodity market, and the two children shouted at the survivors outside, "As long as Xiangqing calms down, we will definitely supply you with supplies. If you want to take supplies out of Xiangqing now, you'd better give up this idea as soon as possible. We can barely survive ourselves, and we don't have any more supplies to give to other cities." Those survivors who carried supplies out were not necessarily all from City E, there were also people from other cities. But they all knew what happened in Xiangqing, and no one came out to say a fair word for Xiangqing, and no one helped Xiangqing stop those people who were causing trouble inside and outside Xiangqing. If that's the case, then why should Xiangqing provide supplies to these people? Of course, Xiangqing must stabilize the order of its own base before it will have the energy to help others. Among the group of men outside the material market, one was the material buyer from City F. He called back to report everything that happened in the Xiangqing base to his city commander. The city management commander of City F pondered for a moment and said to his material purchaser, "First, you should pay close attention to what happens in Xiangqing. If Xiangqing is destroyed, you should organize people to get supplies as quickly as possible and transport them back to F City." Seeing that Xiangqing was like a candle in the wind and was about to collapse, the commander of F City had no intention of sacrificing his own men to help Xiangqing. The first thing he thought of was how to gain enough benefits for his small city F. The survivor who was in charge of purchasing for F City said hesitantly, "Commander, should we help Xiang City? Xiang City may not be destroyed. He often stays in Xiangqing, so he understands it too. If a city like Xiangqing were destroyed, it would be very likely that City F would no longer be able to find a city to purchase supplies from in the future. Xiangqing is still relatively good now. Although the Xiangqing base has always said that survivors are strictly prohibited from carrying supplies out of Xiangqing, the direction they have restricted has always been East City. Xiangqing did not restrict other survivors from taking Xiangqing supplies out to their own small cities or small bases. So in fact, These survivors who often go to Xiangqing know that if Xiangqing is destroyed, it will not be beneficial to the overall survival rate of the survivors. The key point is that the Xiangqing base does not seem to have achieved full encirclement of the city walls. However, the Xiangqing base is stronger than the outside world thinks and will not be destroyed so easily. It would be better to take advantage of now and sell the Xiangqing base well. In the future, City F may also purchase supplies from the Xiangqing base. The commander of F City on the other end of the phone scolded, "How can we have the ability to manage the war between East City and Xiang City? It's already good enough that we can take care of ourselves now. If the gods fight, the little devils will suffer.
Stay calm.
We just need to find the right time to drag the supplies back to City F. As for the rest, don't worry about it." The commander of City F spoke in a very harsh tone. The survivors under him who were responsible for delivering the goods had no idea of the considerations of their superiors. Seeing that the whole world is undergoing drastic changes, can they not think more about themselves? At present, the Xiangqing base is the best developed among all the survivors' gathering places. Not only in terms of the abundance of their supplies, but also in terms of base defense and base order, Xiangqing base is also number one among all the survivors' gathering places. Seeing that the Xiangqing base is growing bigger and bigger, it actually does not bring any benefits to other forces. Think about it carefully. If City F wants to survive, it only has so many supplies, and all the supplies are concentrated in the Xiangqing base. If other cities want supplies, they have to travel thousands of miles to the Xiangqing base to transport them. However, if the Xiangqing base was destroyed, the supplies stored in the Xiangqing base would be released. To put it cruelly, if all the survivors in the Xiangqing base died, wouldn't there be a large number of survivors missing in the world to divide up their remaining supplies? This is also the consideration of the superiors. The world is cruel, and there are only so many survival materials. If others don't die, then you will be the only one who will die. Based on this premise, it is fine for City F and other cities to just sit back and watch the fight between the two tigers. The group of survivors outside the commodity market, each with their own agenda, remained silent and stopped talking. Sneered at the survivors outside the door through the rolling shutter. She didn't say anything. Holding the child in her arms, she locked the rolling door more than a dozen times, then turned around and went to Dafu and Xiaofu to get the gun. Because of the sudden tense atmosphere, all the survivors in the Xiangqing base who could hide in the houses did so. Of course, there were also many survivors who took their weapons and set off to the west of Xiangqing base to help Chao Feng defend the west of Xiangqing base. Streets and alleys of the entire Xiangqing base seemed exceptionally empty. At this moment, a large number of survivors armed with weapons rushed to the outside of the rescue center. Huami had been pushed into the emergency area. Gong Yi had stationed more than 100 guards in the rescue center and the emergency area. Those stationed outside the emergency area prevented Chen Hu's killers from entering the emergency area. Both sides probably knew that this was the last fight. Chen Hu's killers are already desperate, and no one knows what they will do in the end. In the emergency area, just have to hold their ground. At this time, Huami was half lying on the delivery bed, holding a Gatling gun tightly in her hand. A young nurse rushed into the empty delivery room. She said hurriedly, "All the patients have been evacuated." But, as she spoke, the young nurse looked at Huami on the delivery bed with a worried look on her face. "Take a long time for you to give birth to the baby." At this time, Huami was shaking with pain all over her body. Her head was covered in sweat, and her clothes were wet and stuck to her body. "It's okay, I can hold on. I can hold on, I can hold on." If she had known that giving birth was not that easy, Huami would have been prepared for it. "Hurry up, is there any way for me to give birth quickly?" She was anxious. There was a big fight outside, and she was anxious to go out and fight. Xian Chiru thought about it, and then she asked Tu Lijia to help Huami sit up. She looked back anxiously at the door of the delivery room and said to Huami, "We try to have a natural birth as much as possible. We can't do a cesarean section at this time. If a cesarean section is required, anesthesia is required. But in this situation, no one knows how many killers outside will rush into the emergency area. In this situation, if Huami were to be given anesthesia, I'm afraid no one would survive. Even though Huami is in the critical moment of giving birth, she is still the most powerful fighter among all the people here. If she gave birth naturally, in an emergency, if the garrison outside could not defend her, Huami would still be able to protect herself. Huami wanted to roll over in so much pain, but she could already hear gunshots from afar outside the delivery room. The 100 or so garrisons that Gong Yi left in the emergency area were all just ordinary garrisons. It was unknown how long they could last when competing with those professional killers. Huami was in so much pain that her soul was about to leave her body. She pointed at a pile of guns in the corner of the delivery room and said to Tu Lijia, "Tu Lijia, do me a favor, send these guns to the garrisons." Tu Lijia was originally pushing Huami's belly to help the twin babies in her belly to get into the right position. This is to avoid the two babies from fighting and entangled in the belly, resulting in an abnormal fetal position and failure to deliver naturally. Hearing Huami's words, she turned around, her face covered in sweat and shock. Tu Lijia looked at the guns and ammunition piled up like a small mountain in the delivery room. Where did so many guns and ammunition come from? Tu Lijia didn't have time to think about it. She quickly found a cart, quickly piled the guns in the delivery room into the cart, and pushed it out of the delivery room. Ku Minghong is preparing for Plan B. Plan B is to anesthetize Huami and perform a cesarean section. Although the risk of a cesarean section is very high in this situation, if Huami is unable to give birth, a cesarean section will be the only option as a last resort. After all, in most cases, cesarean section is the choice for twin births. Seeing the young nurse, Tu Lijia, pushing out a cart of guns and ammunition, Ku Minghong rubbed his nervous heart. Even standing where he was, he could hear the continuous gunfire coming from the emergency area. Ku Minghong nodded to Tu Lijia and watched Tu Lijia push the guns and ammunition out. In the delivery room, Huami stood up from the delivery bed with the help of Xi and Chiru and walked around the bed. Huami found it difficult to hold on. At this time, Xi and Chiru lifted up one of Huami's arms and supported her arm with her thin shoulders. Xi and Chiru was also sweating all over, but she still encouraged Huami. "It's a long march of 10,000 miles. We have already walked 9,000 miles. There are only a few steps left. Ami, we must persevere. You are the strongest. You have always been the strongest." Huami was covered in sweat, but the amniotic fluid under her body stopped flowing at this time. She held the Gatling gun in her other hand, half of her body resting on Xi and Chiru, and the other half leaning against the Gatling gun, and said in great pain, "This hurts more than the worst injury I've ever had. Why does giving birth hurt so much?" Xi and Chiru's face was pale. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and took 2 more steps forward with difficulty, supporting Huami. "That's right. It's like this when women give birth. It's level 10 pain. We have to persevere. Come on, take a few more steps." Xi and Chiru encouraged Huami and supported her as she walked a few steps forward. Huami couldn't bear the pain and couldn't even hold on to the Gatling gun in her hand. As she staggered forward, she gave Xi and Chiru a difficult smile and said, "No wonder those people outside wanted to take advantage of my childbirth to cause trouble. This is indeed a good opportunity to destroy Xiangqing." She was in so much pain. The pain of childbirth was beyond her imagination. Huami felt that she might die here. "Dr. Xi, if I faint, this will be Xiangqing's fate. You need to tell Gong Yi not to panic and to guard Xiangqing well. When you find a chance, grind Xian Hu to dust."
Huami murmured.
Xi and Chiru supported her and took 2 more steps forward. No one will faint from the pain of giving birth. This is the greatness of mothers. No matter how much pain they feel, they will not faint from it. "Ami, hold on a little longer. You have to open all 10 of your fingers. If you don't leave now, the baby will stay in your belly for too long. Ami, hold on a little longer. Think about your 2 lovely babies. You will meet them soon. All the suffering you are going through now is worth it." She dragged Huami and took 2 more steps around the delivery bed. At this moment, those people outside the emergency area launched a frenzied attack on the emergency area. The bodies were already spread out in front of the entrance to the emergency area. On this garrison side, since everyone wore bulletproof vests provided by Huami, not many garrisons lost their lives. Some of the garrisons had minor scratches, but the energy drops in the emergency area were free of charge, and they were allowed to use them like water. At this time, there is no need to save these energy drops when garrisoning. They fought outside the emergency area, and as many of Chun Hu and Chu Shiheng's men as went there were killed. In the East City base, in Chu Shiheng's tent, several phones kept ringing. Chu Shiheng was very busy. After he hung up one phone, another one rang. After that call ended, several other phones started ringing. Chu Shiheng had a headache and said to Chun Hu, who was smoking a cigar, "Xiangqing has not been breached yet." Not only have the zombies in the west of Xiangqing not entered the west of Xiangqing, but the survivors in the safe zone have not entered the Xiangqing base either, and the zombies in the north of Xiangqing are still in the north of Xiangqing. None of the people who blocked the supply line of Chichuan survived. Tell me, is this the ultimate move you mentioned? Chun Hu, isn't this considered a big move? His eyes were filled with gloom, and he stared at Chu Shiheng. Several mobile phones on the desk kept ringing. This was his final counterattack against the Xiangqing base, gathering the last of his strength. But how could Chun Hu know that the Xiangqing base had not been captured? No matter which link, it failed. Chun Hu pressed the cigar in his hand hard into the ashtray. He took out his cell phone and said to the other end of the line, "At all costs, gather all the remaining strength in Xiangqing and destroy the emergency department for me. Since all other steps have failed, I'll just kill Huami right now." As long as Huami is killed directly, it will be considered as revenge for Chun Hu. Yes, that's right. Chun Hu has no way to eliminate the Xiangqing base, which is such a serious threat. He couldn't deal with Gong Yi either. So now, Chun Hu is picking on the weak. He can only kill Huami, so he will concentrate on killing Huami. After the message was sent out, all the people that Chun Hu was ambushing in the Xiangqing base rushed to the emergency area. It was at this time, just as they gathered outside the emergency area, that someone shouted loudly from behind, "Gong Yi is here! Gong Yi is here!" Rush in quickly before he could finish his words. A white cloud, like a sandstorm, quickly swept over from behind the hundreds of people. The killers who were blocking the entrance to the emergency area were caught in the white cloud as soon as they flew into the air. Finally, a cloud of blood mist exploded in the air. The red blood mist blended with the white sea of clouds. As the blood mist fell into the sea of clouds, its color became lighter and lighter. The originally bright red blood mist was like a slowly blooming flower and finally dissipated in the white sea of clouds. This moment passed very quickly, yet it seemed as if several long centuries had passed. The killers who were blocking the entrance to the emergency area had no time to react at all, and in the end they all turned into blood mist. The white sea of clouds stopped at the entrance of the emergency area. Gong Yi, wearing his blood-stained garrison combat uniform, rushed in hastily through layers of white clouds. Fang Yuqi, who stayed in the emergency area, ran out from behind the obstacle with a look of joy on his face, holding his gunshot-injured arm. He shouted loudly, "Commander, why are you here?" Gong Yi hurriedly walked towards the door of the delivery room. Without answering Fang Yuqi, he ordered, "Organize all garrisons to the north and west of Xiangqing base. I'm not sure how long my powers can last, so hurry up." Because the north of Xiangqing base is too far away from the emergency area, when Gong Yi left, the wall built by his mental power still looked very solid. However, since this was his first time using such a mental power skill, he didn't know how long such a solid wall built with mental power could last. Gong Yi was not sure when Huami, who had already entered the delivery room, would be able to give birth to the baby. Therefore, Gong Yi could only send most of the garrisons within the entire Xiangqing base to the north of Xiangqing base. He warned Fang Yuqi, "If there is any danger in the north of Xiangqing, you must inform me. You are no longer needed inside the Xiangqing base. Just go and guard the north of Xiangqing base without worry." Because his mental power suddenly became extremely powerful. The entire Xiangqing base no longer requires any defense. Gong Yi alone is enough here. Fang Yuqi was stunned for a moment. Then he reacted, quickly summoned the garrison in the emergency area, and hurried north to the Xiangqing base. Just as the garrison in the emergency area was leaving, a call came to Chun Hu's cell phone. After Chun Hu heard what they had said, he asked, "Has Gong Yi's Xiangqingbai been defended?" It was like a bolt from the blue. How did he hold on? The other party was speechless. Because they did not receive the news in time, they did not know what happened in Xiangqingbai. Chun Hu was extremely annoyed. What kind of hard rock had he hit? I fought back so hard, but my target kept giving way. Now I can't even kill a pregnant woman? How many people do I have left? Chun Hu frowned and counted the final number of people. Finally, he laughed again for no apparent reason. The entire emergency department garrison has been withdrawn? Are you sure? He immediately lowered his head and gave a few instructions. After hanging up the phone, Chun Hu raised his head and laughed. He said to the troubled Chu Xing, "Even God is helping us. Gong Yi has no one left." He arrived at the emergency area alone and actually moved all the garrisons in the emergency area away. Gong Yi is the only one left in the emergency room, along with his wife who is giving birth in the delivery room. There are only a few people left with Chun Hu. But Chun Hu left more people in the emergency area than Gong Yi. You know, in the entire emergency area, Gong Yi is the only one who is capable of fighting. How dare he withdraw Feng Yuqi and other garrisons? He would be courting his own destruction by doing so. When Chu Xing heard what Chun Hu said, he was also delighted. He hung up the phone in his hand. This was great. He directly arrested the couple in Xiangqing base. This time, not only will they kill Gong Yi and Huami, but even their children will have to be wiped out. The two looked at each other and laughed, feeling that victory was just around the corner. At this time, Huami was the only woman waiting to give birth in the delivery room of the Xiangqing emergency area. Because of the coming of the end of the world, the number of pregnant women among the survivors has dropped sharply, the number of pregnant women has decreased, and the number of women giving birth has also decreased sharply. So today, in this delivery room that had been idle for a long time, Huami was the only one giving birth. She felt as if she had just emerged from the water. When she heard the gunshots stop outside, Huami asked Xian Chiru tremblingly, "What's going on outside? Why is there no sound?" Just as Xian Chiru was about to speak, she heard Gong Yi outside the delivery room loudly and anxiously ask, Ami, how are you? Have you given birth to the baby? It's Commander Gong who's here." A smile instantly appeared on Xian Chiru's face. Huami's originally tense heart also relaxed. She loosened the Gatling gun she had been holding tightly in her hand and shouted heartbreakingly to the outside of the delivery room. No, these two little ones just won't come out. They are just tormenting me." Xian Chiru looked at Huami disapprovingly. "You should save some energy for giving birth. Why are you shouting? If you have the energy to shout, you should save it up. Giving birth is really hard physical work." Gong Yi, who was outside the delivery room, wiped the sweat from his forehead with his hands and rested his hands on the door of the delivery room. He didn't dare push the thin door hard. "I could only my forehead against the door. What can I do for you? Ami, what can I do for you?" If he could have a baby for Huami, Gong Yi wouldn't mind having one for her. But the problem is that his body doesn't allow it. In the delivery room, Huami pursed her lips tightly and her face was pale. She listened to Xian Chiru very much and didn't want to yell at Gong Yi at this time. She had to save up her strength to have a baby. Outside the delivery room, Gong Yi, who had been waiting for Huami's answer for a long time, simply pushed open the door of the delivery room. As soon as he entered the delivery room, he saw Huami, who was soaking wet, being supported by Xian Chiru. Huami's face was paler than a ghost, and her half-long hair was wet and stuck to her face. She looked as miserable as could be. When had Gong Yi ever seen Huami in such a miserable state? Especially since Huami was still wearing a maternity dress, there were several streaks of bright red blood on her bloated white legs. When Gong Yi saw this scene, tears started to flow. He walked over, held Huami with his hands, and shouted in a low voice, "Why are you standing up? Aren't you giving birth? Hurry up and lie down and give birth." Huami didn't even have the strength to push Gong Yi. She rolled her eyes at Gong Yi, seemingly unwilling to explain. Xian Shiru was already sweating because she was supporting Huami. This is the only way. If you can't walk anymore, just do squats. Oh my god. This is really going to be Huami's fate. She doesn't even have the strength to walk, and now she's asked to do squats? Gong Yi's lips turned pale with fear. Seeing Huami in such pain, he asked with tears in his eyes, "Let's just have a cesarean section. A cesarean section. How can this be possible?" Xian Shiru moved her lips in disapproval and scolded Gong Yi. "She has already suffered half of this punishment, and you want her to have a cesarean section? The baby's fetal position is correct. It's not impossible to deliver it. It's like this for every woman when she gives birth. It hurts like this. Now that the pain is over, it won't hurt after the birth." After saying that, Xian Shiru looked at Huami. Huami shook her head in pain. She didn't want to talk, but she felt that Xian Shiru was right. She has already suffered half of the sin, and now she is being stabbed again. Isn't this making her suffer twice? She gritted her teeth and squeezed out a few words. "Gong Yi, help me squat." Gong Yi stood behind Huami, put his hands under her armpits, and helped Huami stand beside the delivery bed. Huami grabbed the iron railings of the delivery bed with both hands, and using almost all her strength, she slowly squatted down. Then, in great pain, he slowly stood up again. No one can understand this kind of pain. No one can understand. Huami thought that this would be the only time she would give birth to a child in her life. What was going on in her mind at that time? She had to keep the child? She had to give birth to the child? She couldn't help but hate Gong Yi, who was crying behind her. It was all because of this man who didn't take good measures. As a result, she is suffering now. If the child was born, the first thing Huami would do was to kill Gong Yi.
Huami did what she said.
Even if she couldn't beat Gong Yi, she would chop off Gong Yi's thing. While cursing Gong Yi hatefully in her heart, she slowly squatted down and then slowly stood up. It hurts so much. It makes me want to die. It seems like the pain will never end. Huami gritted her teeth, shivered, squatted down again and stood up again and again. She groaned and finally couldn't help but let out a painful sound. When had a strong woman like her ever experienced such pain? Gong Yi's eyes were red. He held Huami in his arms to prevent her from falling down.
Gong Yi siora apoy sono usoat.
Never again. We will never again have children. Seeing Huami in so much pain, Gong Yi felt a sense of respect in his heart. Such a woman deserves his respect. Huami is really a great person. It is greater than saving the whole world. Gong Yi has a deep understanding of this. At this moment, he even feels that there is no role in the world that can be greater than the role of a mother. Huami could no longer feel any other emotions except pain. She knew that Gong Yi shed tears, but for Huami, she couldn't think of anything more. Now I am only concentrating on resisting this heart-wrenching pain. At this time, Huami truly felt that no matter how strong or good a woman is, it would be extremely painful during childbirth. While Huami, Gong Yi, and Xian Shiru in the delivery room were all concentrating on dealing with this delivery. The young nurse who was helping in the delivery room suddenly turned around, holding 2 guns in her hands, pointing them at Gong Yi and Huami's foreheads. She fired, but for some reason, she missed. Huami's sweat had soaked her entire body. Her face was pale, and she looked at the young nurse weakly. She was in so much pain all over that she couldn't bear it anymore, and yet this little nurse came here to make a fool of herself. Gong Yi had a stern face, and just looked at the young nurse who was pointing a gun at his wife, without saying a word. The bullet missed. It was not an accident. Xian Shiru's face changed. She stood in front of Huami's belly, and asked the nurse in a cold voice, "What are you doing? Do you know who you are pointing the gun at?" The young nurse's face was full of hostility. That expression was completely different from the diligent young nurse that Xian Shiru and Huami knew before. It was like 2 different people. The young nurse snorted coldly and said to Huami and Xian Shiru, "What do I want to do? Of course I want this witch named Hua to die. Oh, let me introduce myself. My code name is Wild Rose. You never expected that I have been lurking around you. Wild Rose is such a familiar code name, I've never heard of it." Huami complained weakly in her heart, but she didn't speak out loud because she didn't have the strength. Wild Rose, the young nurse who had been lurking in the emergency area for so long, introduced herself in a babble. She thought she would be of no use anymore, but she didn't know that Huami would die at her hands in the end. Wild Rose was so happy that she became a little too proud of herself and fired a few more shots that Huami missed again. She frowned and looked at Xian Chiru's horrified eyes. Wild Rose couldn't help but said to Xian Chiru proudly, "Look at how many capable people Boss Chen has, but I am the only one who can accomplish this great task." He continued shooting but still missed. God knows where Chirin who made friends with so many talented people. He is really an extraordinary person. If it weren't for the incident with Huami, half of the apocalypse would have been ruled by Chirin Hu. Huami didn't want to have an argument with this chatterbox little nurse. She squatted down again and stood up again with strength. In fact, she didn't do many squats, but Huami felt that the day seemed as long as a century. She could hardly hear what the little nurse said, which made the little nurse, who thought she had already won the final victory, quite dissatisfied. Wild Rose pointed her gun at Huami and shot again. Gong Yi turned his head, and a white, tentacle-like thing stretched out from behind Gong Yi and hit the little nurse directly. "That's enough. Don't think that just because I'm busy, you can provoke me again and again." With a cold voice, he pushed the young nurse from the ground to the wall. The young nurse's head was covered in blood, and her whole body was pressed against the wall. She turned around in surprise and looked at Gong Yi. Before the little nurse could say anything, the white cloud tentacles grabbed the little nurse's neck and lifted her up high. The little nurse screamed, How is this possible? What is this?" The survivor's understanding of superpowers only stays at the changes in human power. Because of the untimely exchange of information, they did not know that a wall of cloud and fog had appeared in the north of Xiangqing. Therefore, when seeing the tentacle appearing behind Gong Yi, not only the young nurse was surprised, but even Xian Chiru was also very surprised. "What on earth is this?" Huami was sweating all over and shouted, "Kill her. I can't do that anymore. I feel my cub is about to come out. Hurry up and kill all the unnecessary threats." Xian Chiru didn't have time to figure out what the suddenly appearing cloud tentacles were. She said hastily, Hurry, the baby is coming out, help me to the delivery bed quickly." Just as she finished speaking, there was a sound of snap, and the little nurse Wild Rose's neck was broken. Gong Yi didn't even look at the young nurse with a broken neck. He simply picked up Huami horizontally and put her back on the delivery bed. The body of the little nurse Wild Rose fell softly to the ground. Her eyes were still open, and there was still an expression of disbelief on her face. It was as if he couldn't believe how she died when she was so sure of victory. The next second, Xian Chiru shouted loudly, Tu Li Jia, come in and help quickly." Huami had already been carried to the delivery bed by Gong Yi. She was in excruciating pain. All she could hear was Xian Chiru yelling at her, "Push harder, push harder." Huami followed Xian Chiru's shouting and shouted louder. She held Gong Yi's hand tightly with her hand. Gong Yi didn't dare to say a word. He clenched his teeth tightly, afraid that he would cry as soon as he opened his mouth. Huami looked like she was in so much pain. Tu Lijia ran in from the delivery room, pulling a trailer, with sweat all over her brow. She saw the corpse on the ground, was stunned for a moment, screamed, and pressed down on Huami's stomach. It was at this time that Huami felt a fleshy ball of meat being squeezed out of her body. Suddenly, half of the pain in Huami's body was relieved. I only heard Taligia shouting happily, "It's coming out! It's coming out!" Gong Yi was standing next to Huami, bending over, with one of his hands being held by Huami, which had bloody fingerprints on it. His other hand gently stroked Huami's wet forehead. His eyes sparkled with delight, and he tilted his head to look. His daughter came out. She is his eldest daughter. Then, Xian Chiru said happily, "It's a son. Wow, what a cute fat boy." Huami subconsciously turned her head to look at Gong Yi. Gong Yi's happy and joyful expression suddenly collapsed, and a hint of disappointment appeared on his face. Yes, Gong Yi has always said that what he wants is 2 daughters. It turned out to be a son. No wonder he was disappointed. But when he saw Gong Yi again, he adjusted his mentality instantly. He soothed Huami's forehead and said to her softly, "It's a son, it's a son. You worked so hard to give birth to him. I will love him no matter if it's a son or a daughter." Of course he would like it, whether it was a son or a daughter. Although Gong Yi wanted a daughter more, a son would be nice too. He comforted Huami and looked at the son in Xian Qiru's arms. Xian Qiru had already taken the child aside to clean up. She moved very quickly, because she was a professional after all. After a while, the child burst into tears. But at this time, Huami had no time to care about her son, as her stomach began to ache violently again. Tu Lijia was adjusting the fetal position for the second child. There was still another child in Huami's belly that had not been born yet. After the first child was born, the second child was obviously born much faster. With the kneading and fiddling of Tu Lijia and Xian Qiru, who had returned, the second child was born soon. Gong Yi no longer had any expectations about the gender of this second child. He stretched his neck and looked at the second child, who was held in Xian Qiru's arms. Until Xian Qiru said happily, "This second baby is a daughter." Gong Yi jumped up suddenly, his eyes shining, and asked excitedly, "Is it really a daughter? Hurry up, bring her here, and let me see her." As he spoke, he excitedly let go of Huami's hand, took out his own cell phone, and took a lot of photos of his daughter. Huami was absolutely speechless at Gong Yi's behavior. She looked for something nearby and wanted to grab it to smash Gong Yi, a guy who only loved his daughter, to death. Nothing was found. Gong Yi had already come close to Xian Qiru, watching her excitedly cleaning his daughter. It wasn't until his daughter cried for the first time that Gong Yi couldn't hold back his tears. He held his daughter, who was already dressed in her little clothes, and came to Huami. "Look, this is our daughter." Huami smiled weakly at Gong Yi, her eyes missing Gong Yi and looking at the son in Xian Qiru's arms. She couldn't help but remind the excited Gong Yi, "You still have a son." Gong Yi then remembered that before his daughter was born, his wife had given birth to a son for him. So he laughed and turned back, carefully taking his son from Xian Qiru's hands. He brought his son and daughter together to show Huami Tu Lijia was pressing Huami's belly to expel the placenta from her belly. Seeing this, she teased Gong Yi, "Commander, you are such a fool. You only remember that Ami gave you a daughter, but you forgot that you have a son." Huami rolled her eyes. Gong Yi just smiled and said awkwardly, "How could that be possible? They are all my children. I will definitely treat them equally. I definitely treat everyone equally. It's impossible for me to only like my daughter." Gong Yi said this with great confidence. Looking at Gong Yi, who was making a foolish oath, Huami closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. There is still a long time to go, so she treats Gong Yi equally. At this time in Xiangqing, all the people who needed to be cleaned out had been cleaned out. The corpses were collected one by the garbage truck and taken to Huami's high-end garbage station. The entire Xiangqing was clean, as if it had never experienced such a change. After experiencing this long, dark night of many unexpected events, Xiangqing has been completely surrounded by zombies. All the cities knew that Xiangqing was under siege. But Xiangqing did not perish, because there are still many survivors of selling goods in other cities in Xiangqing. They knew clearly that although Xiangqing was surrounded by zombies outside, it was still as solid as a rock. At this time, the management commander of City F called his survivors. The management commander said, "Take your men and search the streets and alleys of Xiangqing to see if there are any more people belonging to Chen Hu. Kill a few of Chen Hu's men, then go find Xin Zhen and flatter him." The survivor, who was carrying goods and received a call from his commander, was speechless for a while. He told the commander of F City the truth. "Commander, as far as I know, all the troublemakers in Xiangqing have been shot dead this time. There's nothing we can do to help." During the previous chaos, he had already made suggestions to his own chief management commander, asking him to send people to help Xiangqing. But from the beginning to the end, his family's management commander believed that the early destruction of Xiangqing would be beneficial to F City. City F only needs to sit back and watch the fight between the two tigers. As a result, no one expected that Xiangqing not only survived, but also achieved a complete victory with very few casualties. And not a single zombie broke through the east, west, south, and north defense lines of the Xiangqing base and entered the Xiangqing base. The strength of Xiangqing cannot be underestimated. On the other end of the phone, the management commander of F City pondered for a moment and whispered to the survivors he brought goods with him. I heard that the strange phenomenon that happened in the north of Xiangqing, that the mysterious cloud wall, was built by Gong Yi's supernatural power. The chief administrator of City F knew about this matter before anyone else, because he also had spies in the north of Xiangqing. His informant also took photos of the strange site in the north of Xiangqing and sent them back to him. When seeing the photo, the management commander of F City knew that becoming an enemy of Xiangqing would not bring any benefits to F City. Only then did he hurriedly send a message to the survivors who had brought the goods with him. The management commander of City F had no idea that the problem would be resolved so quickly by the Xiangqing base. No matter which line it is, even the seemingly useless Afu family guards the material market well. There was no chaos anywhere. The chaotic place was filled with piles of corpses, and they were cleared away by the Xiangqing base not long after. The speed is unimaginable. This surprised the management commander of City F. He really didn't expect that although the Xiangqing base had no management level, every aspect was managed very well. A Xiangqing base like this could not be destroyed so easily by a tide of zombies. What's more, there is another person in Xiangqing base, Gong Yi, who possesses such terrifying supernatural powers. It's really enviable. Why is Gong Yi in the Xiangqing base? Why isn't Gong Yi in City F? The survivor holding the phone didn't know what to say. Anyway, it is impossible to pretend and sell the Xiangqing base in a good way now. Then he heard his commander say on the phone, since the Xiangqing base has already solved the problem, there is no need for us in F City to help. Let's return to where we were. When can you bring the supplies out? City F has a logistics team that is specifically responsible for transporting goods. They only need to buy supplies from the Xiangqing base and send them to City F. Although it takes more than a week to enter and exit the Xiangqing base, this logistics team cooperates very well. Every day, someone successfully passes through the observation area of the Xiangqing base, enters the Xiangqing base, and takes goods out of the city. Although the number is not large, they are like ants moving house continuously. The survivor who brought goods looked embarrassed and said to the F City management commander on the other end of the phone, the material market in Xiangqing has not been opened yet. It has been closed all the time. I don't know either. What will happen next? Maybe we should wait a little longer and the Xiangqing base will give us an explanation. The commander on the other side was obviously anxious. How can we wait? There are many survivors in F City now. What if we run out of supplies? We must find a way to transport the supplies from the Xiangqing base out of the city as quickly as possible. But no matter how anxious he was, the supplies were now in the hands of the Xiangqing base. The Xiangqing base did not open the supply market, and no survivor had any way to take the goods out of the city.
Urgent?
There is really no use in being anxious. The news that Xiangqing base survived this wave of crisis also spread back to Yi City. Chun-Hu in Yi City had a gloomy look on his face and punched the desk. Chu Xiang also looked unhappy. He said to Chun-Hu, "We suffered heavy losses this time. How come Xiangqing was able to withstand it so well? God knows how much the Chu family has paid in order to cooperate with Chun-Hu." In terms of heads alone, the Chu family provided a lot of support to Chun-Hu. As a result, this wave took away most of the Chu family's followers. Chun-Hu looked at Chu Xiang gloomily, and his tone was very bad. What he didn't tell Chu Xiang was that this time Chun-Hu had bet all his belongings. In the end, all the power hidden in Xiangqing has been used by Chun-Hu. The result is still failure. At this point, Chun-Hu no longer has any trump cards left. But he would not tell Chu Xiang about these things. After all, this is a very realistic world. If Chu Xiang knew that Chun-Hu no longer had any confidence, he would not cooperate with Chun-Hu anymore. At least in Yi City, Chu Xiang will abandon Chen Hu and let Chen Hu become an ordinary survivor. Chu Xiang was still in the tent with a tantrum. He said to Chen Hu with a tone of accusation, "You promised that you would succeed this time. Even if you can't kill Gong Yi and destroy Xiangqing, at least you can kill Huami. You promised me that." Because Huami died, the position of Gong Yi's wife was vacated. At that time, Chu Xiang would use the relationship between the two bases to propose a strong alliance with Gong Yi and let Gong Yi marry his sister Chu Yimin. It was only natural to bring Gong Yi and his subordinates to the Yi City base to pledge their allegiance. As a result, Huami is alive and well now. Not only was she alive and well, she also gave birth to a child for Gong Yi. The flesh on Chen Hu's face twitched. He seemed to be holding back his anger. How dare a young boy like Chu Xiang, who is still wet behind the ears, yell in front of him? Back then, when Chen Hu was out there, Chu Xiang was still just an embryo. After a few seconds, Chen Hu endured it. A sinister smile spread across his face, and he said to Chu Xiang, "We can only blame our opponents for being too strong, not our incompetence. But we haven't lost yet. Isn't there a young lady from the Chu family outside the Xiangqing base? As long as Miss Chu can give a little more support, Yi City's plan to win over Gong Yi can still be implemented smoothly. Think about it, Miss Chu actually does have this condition. After all, that's the true nature of men. And that which Huami is still in confinement after giving birth." Chu Xiang followed Chen Hu's line of thought and thought about it, and found that this was indeed the case. However, in the next moment, Hu Yanxiang hurriedly walked in from outside the tent. He said to Chu Xiang and Chen Hu, "Oh no. All the people we sent to Xiangqing base this time have been detained by Xiangqing base." Before Chu Xiang and Chen Hu could react, they heard Hu Yanxiang say, "Those of us who were left to build the city wall have begun to flee in large numbers. They are all heading to the Xiangqing base. This is not the worst. The worst thing is that a large number of skeletons of survivors suddenly appeared outside the Yi City base." Chu Xiang and Chen Hu's expressions suddenly became strange. Chen Hu looked at Hu Yanxiang and asked, "What's going on? Tell me more." So, Hu Yanxiang told him everything that had happened on the construction site in recent times. In fact, there have always been cases of survivors going missing in the Yi City base. But Hu Yanxiang thought this was very normal, because many survivors from the Xiangqing base came to the Yi City base with the purpose of living a good life. However, after arriving at the Yi City base, they found that they could not live a so-called good life in the Yi City base. On the contrary, here we can't eat enough, wear enough clothes, and even sleep poorly. Even women were reduced to the point of not having enough food to eat or enough clothes to wear. Those survivors could only wait for the stinky steamed buns given to them by the Chu family every day. So there are many survivors who want to return to Xiangqing base. At the beginning, Hu Yanxiang brought the Chu family's bodyguards to stop the survivors who wanted to leave. But later, as more and more people went missing, Hu Yanxiang realized that he could not stop it at all. It was not until 2 days ago, after Chu Yimin left the Yi City base, that Hu Yanxiang received a report that a large number of skeletons had appeared outside the city wall that was being built at the Yi City base. He ran over and saw the white bones spread out outside the Yi City base. It was a depression that ordinary survivors seldom visited, and that depression was filled with white skeletons. Some of the skeletons still had shreds of meat hanging from them. Because Chen Hu and Chu Xiang had been busy attacking the Xiangqing base these 2 days, Hu Yanxiang did not report this matter. He did not dare to report it, for fear that Chen Hu and Chu Xiang would investigate and accuse him of incompetence. As a result, there were more and more skeletons in the depression. The survivors went missing, and then the supervisor of the Chu family went missing. Gradually, the survivors who lost the supervision of the supervisor knew that no one was in charge of them now. If they don't leave City E, they will probably become skeletons in the depression. A large number of survivors found ways to leave the East City base. Hu Yanxiang couldn't stop him. Chu Xiang and Chen Hu looked at each other, and Chu Xiang pointed at Hu Yanxiang. "Well, you did a good thing for me." When he said this, his voice seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. He stood up, kicked Hu Yanxiang, and said angrily, Why don't you take me to see it? Hu Yanxiang quickly got up from the ground and headed towards the depression with Chu Xiang and Chen Hu. As a result, after coming out, the scenes along the way surprised Chu Xiang and Chen Hu. The once popular city, Yi seemed particularly withered in just a few days. This situation became increasingly serious when the two of them arrived at the construction site. Chu Xiang frowned and asked Hu Yanxiang, "Where are the people who are building the wall here?" He gave the task of building the wall to Hu Yanxiang, so neither Chu Xiang nor Chen Hu asked about the construction of the Yi City wall during this period. While the two of them were concentrating on mobilizing manpower to deal with Xiangqing, they were fully confident that the wall of the Yi City base would be built as quickly as that of the Xiangqing base. After all, it didn't take long for the Xiangqing base to build the city wall to the east of the base. Moreover, most of the people who built the eastern city wall for Xiangqing base were women. At that time, most of the young and middle-aged labor force in Xiangqing base flowed to Yi City base. These men are much stronger than women. If that were the case, the wall of the Yi City base should have been built long ago. But who knows? When Chu Xiang and Chen Hu came to see it, the highest wall in the base was only 1 meter high. What the Hades can this stop? A 1-meter high wall is only as high as an adult man's waist. What's more, not all places in the Yi City base have city walls. There is only a small section of the city wall. The remaining area is still the thin barbed wire fence of Yi City. Chu Xing looked at Hu Yanxiang angrily. What a rascal! What a rascal! Hu Yanxiang lowered his head, avoiding his gaze, not daring to look directly into Chu Shiheng's eyes. Chu Xing shouted at Hu Yanxiang. Tell me, why did I build the city wall only a little higher? Why hasn't the wall of the Yi City base been completed yet? You should know that the Yi City base is much smaller than the Xiangqing base. It's impossible that the city wall has been built for so long but still can't completely surround the Yi City base. Hu Yanxiang looked aggrieved. It was not that he did not try his best, but the supplies provided by the Chu family every day were too little. At the beginning, the survivors from the Xiangqing base still had enough strength to move bricks on the construction site. But the Chu family only provided them with a rotten and smelly steamed bun every day. Within 2 days, the survivors either suffered from diarrhea or felt weak all over. The progress of this project cannot be accelerated no matter how much we beat and scold the survivors. Hu Yanxiang was also helpless. He told the truth to Chu Xiang. But Chu Xiang slapped Hu Yanxiang directly. Don't make excuses for me. Our Chu family can provide them with a steamed bun every day. What else do they want? Do you know how many people out there want to eat a steamed bun every day but they can't do anything about it? Compared to those who starve to death, the Yi City base has been very tolerant and forgiving towards these survivors. As Chu Xing spoke, he angrily slapped Hu Yanxiang a few more times. Finally, Chu Xing had no choice but to say angrily, "Lead the way. I'll go take a look at the bones." He asked Hu Yanxiang to lead the way to the depression full of bones. After watching this, kill that rascal Hu Yanxiang. Hu Yanxiang held back his anger and walked towards the depression with Chu Xiang and Chen Hu. The man without clothes had already run away and disappeared. He and Chen Hu were both shocked. Facing this strange scene, Hu Yanxiang whispered beside them. It seems that the man just now had a fleshy tail. He could see it clearly because Hu Yanxiang was standing in the front. The man ran past him. Before he could see the man clearly, he was swept by the man's tail. These words made both Chu Xiang and Chen Hu feel creepy. After all, with Gong Yi's cloud wall at the Xiangqing base, they've already had a basic psychological understanding of the strange phenomena in this world. People can grow tails. If superpowers have appeared, what does it matter if people grow tails? The three returned to the Yi City base, each with their own thoughts in mind. However, before the three people could take any action, the situation at the Yi City base began to deteriorate further. At first, a large number of survivors disappeared and returned to the Xiangqing base. Although survival is difficult now, and the survivors don't eat much, they are still able to defecate continuously. What happened at the Yi City base soon spread to Xiang City. It's not that Qinzhen and others in Xiangqing are very concerned about Yi City. But in just 2 days, the number of survivors from Yi City to Xiangqing was like a tide. The Xiangqing teleportation point, which was originally planned to be abandoned, has been very busy in the past 2 days. From this, Qin Jin and the others realized that the leader of the survivors still held a large number of teleportation tickets to the Xiangqing base. It's also Huami's fault that she didn't consider so many things when issuing these teleportation tickets. She just focused on releasing the information and didn't think about the fact that Xiangqing would be blocked today and no survivors would be allowed to come to Xiangqing. After giving birth, Huami slept in bed for a whole day, but she didn't sleep all the time during the day. She would be awakened by the slightest noise around her and then turn her head to look at the 2 babies beside her. Every time she turned her head to look, she could see Gong Yi standing between her and her 2 babies. Huami could fall into a deep sleep again. The birth took too much of her energy and almost exhausted all her strength. When she woke up from her sleep again, Huami heard Qin Jun and Gong Yi whispering outside her ward. Qin Jun reported to Gong Yi the news brought by the survivors from City Yi who came from the Xiangqing base teleportation point. Gong Yi lowered his voice and told Qin Jun, "In any case, Xiangqing has now entered a completely closed state. Any survivors who fly to the Xiangqing teleportation point are not allowed to enter Xiangqing. This is a new rule. No matter whether they survived the 72 hours safely or not, any survivors who came back will be accepted. Not only that, Xiangqing base will no longer accept survivors from other cities, no matter how those survivors came to Xiangqing base. Did they tear up the teleportation ticket and fly here, or did they kill the zombies outside and get in? You can only leave Xiangqing base now, but you can't enter." Huami was lying on the hospital bed. She was a little confused as to why her ears had become so sensitive. In the past, she couldn't hear people outside talking so quietly because there was a door between them. But now, she not only heard it, but also heard it very clearly. Huami was puzzled. She propped herself up and sat up, stretching her neck to look at the 2 babies beside the bed. Because these 2 babies were not born full term, it is said that a gestational age takes 10 months. Huami was actually still more than a month away from giving birth, so for safety reasons, Xi and Chiru let Huami's 2 babies live directly in the blue light box. However, these 2 children underwent comprehensive examinations and were found to have no problems in terms of weight or physical condition. Therefore, Xi and Chiru did not pay special attention to taking care of these 2 babies. Only 2 blue light boxes were placed next to Huami's bed. When Huami woke up, the first thing she saw was her child. Huami had just propped herself up when Gong Yi opened the door and walked in with Qin Jin. The 2 of them kept silent about anything happening in Xiangqing. After all, Huami had just experienced a difficult childbirth. At this time, she should have a good rest and not think too much. Looking at his wife, who was half sitting up, Gong Yi supported himself on the edge of the bed with one hand and kissed Huami on the forehead. His eyes fell on Huami's face, checking her expression. After making sure that Huami looked fine, Gong Yi's eyes couldn't help but slipped into the blue light box and onto the rosy little face of his little daughter. Especially when he saw his daughter opening her little mouth and spitting out bubbles, he couldn't help but laugh. "It's so cute. How can there be such a cute little princess in this world?" Gong Yi was so happy that he carefully pushed his daughter's blue light box closer to Huami gently and quietly, as if afraid of waking up his daughter. Gong Yi said to Huami, "Huami, look at our little daughter. She was spitting bubbles just now. When he grows up, he will definitely be an extremely smart child." "That's great." Gong Yi suddenly felt a surge of pride. Which parent doesn't want their child to be a genius? How lucky he is. Huami looked at Gong Yi in surprise. This man's mental state seemed to be wrong. This child was only 2 days old. How could she tell that she would be an extremely smart child when she grew up? Huami frowned and looked at her little daughter carefully. How could she not see it? Qin Jun was seen standing next to her son's blue light box, laughing. Huami looked at Qin Jun in bewilderment, and Qin Jun said, "Commander Gong thinks that all his children are good." After that, she also said something polite. "I think this little girl is smart. When she grows up, there will be many boys chasing after her." Gong Yi half frowned. "You wish my girl is my favorite. You are not allowed to chase her. You are not allowed to chase her." Qin Jun was helpless. What he didn't say was that compared to Commander Gong, his heart and eyes were filled with his daughter. The sun lying in the blue light box seemed to have fallen out of favor. Huami, who watched Gong Yi's expression change the whole time, sighed and exchanged a helpless look with Qingjin. There is no way to deal with this. Gong Yi is a man who is usually very decisive in killing. Why is he so clingy when facing his daughter now? Gong Yi was seen sitting between two blue light boxes again, looking at his son, then at his daughter, then at his daughter, then at his daughter again. Huami waved to Qingjin to come over, and she asked quietly, Qingjin, what is the current situation in E-City? Tell me in detail. Qingjin was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect that Huami, who was sleeping in the ward, could actually overhear what was happening outside. So she simply didn't hide it and told Huami what was happening in E-City. He added, in the past few days, we have detained many survivors who were carrying goods to City E. After we searched all their supplies, we sent them out of the Xiangqing base. Now the Xiangqing base is completely closed and no one can enter. Huami nodded and thought for a while, then said to Qingjin, judging from the situation you described, I'm afraid something big will happen to the E-City base. I even suggested that the transmission points in the Xiangqing base should be strictly guarded and disinfected every day with strong and violent disinfection. Don't give anyone an opportunity. Under this situation, someone will definitely be dissatisfied and want to force their way into the Xiangqing base. The Xiangqing base must take tough measures and close it when it is said to be closed. Qingjin nodded and pulled the quilt for Huami. I know all these things. Your main task now is to recover your body. The birth of these two children must have caused you a lot of suffering. Huami looked at the two little babies in the blue light box, and her eyes became gentle. Yes, it was because she suffered so much in order to give birth to them, so she had to defend the pure land of Xiangqing base in this cruel doomsday. She couldn't save the entire apocalypse, so Huami could only narrow her target. If we can save a city, we will save it. If we can save an area, we will save it. In fact, no one can be saved, so she can take the people around her and retreat to the Lotus Xingxing supermarket. As soon as Qingjin left, Huami's expression gradually became cold. She looked at Gong Yi, whose face was full of tenderness and kindness, and waved. Commander Gong, come here. Commander Gong quietly left his daughter and son's side and sat down on the edge of Huami's bed. He placed his hands on Huami's shoulders. Before Huami could speak, he tilted his head, kissed Huami on the cheek, and asked, What's wrong? Huami glared at Gong Yi and said seriously, If something happens at the E-City base, Chun Hu will definitely run away. Chun Hu is betting on me, so I can't let him go so easily. The expression on Gong Yi's face gradually became sharp. He narrowed his eyes slightly, his voice filled with anger. It's natural. I definitely can't let him go. Don't worry. Take a good rest now. When you are out of confinement, I will take you to the E-City base for revenge. There is no way to rush this matter, mainly because Huami is still in confinement after giving birth. Although this is the end of the world, let alone the issue of confinement, it is already a great thing for most women to have a stable life. But Huami has certain conditions and requirements. She had the foundation and chose to stay in confinement after giving birth. She has no shortage of supplies. In the end times, as long as you have supplies, you have everything. Huami reluctantly accepted Gong Yi's statement. Besides, the current situation of the E-City base was very unstable. This reminded Huami of the mutant beast that appeared when she was pregnant. The mutant beast appeared outside City E at that time. It is difficult to say whether these mutant beasts have really been eradicated after a few months. Although the timeline is different from the apocalypse that Huami experienced in her previous life. But this is the process of the end of the world. Zombies will definitely come, and mutant beasts will definitely appear. No one should rely on luck. So Huami was barely calmed down by Gong Yi. She also decided to wait and see until the situation in City E became clearer. Otherwise, no matter how many people go there and how many people are sacrificed, it really is not worth it. Gong Yi's serious face suddenly smiled like a blooming flower. He tilted his head, pointed at the two blue light boxes beside Huami's bed, and said to her gently, Don't worry too much. I'm just bored and anxious. Just look at the babies. You have no idea. These two kids are so cute. I can't get enough of looking at them, especially my daughter. Blah, blah, blah. Gong Yi was like a gossipy woman, describing his daughter's every little expression and movement to Huami. In Gong Yi's words, his daughter is extremely smart, like a genius in romance novels who can earn hundreds of billions at the age of 3, operate computers, and become the world's #1 hacker. Huami couldn't help but ask, "Your daughter is so smart. What about your son?" Gong Yi's expression froze for a moment, and he said confidently, "If my son is not so smart, I will throw him into the garrison camp in the future. As for boys, of course they need to be raised in a rough way and not pampered too much." Gong Yi was daydreaming to his heart's content when there was a knock on the ward door. It was Chao Feng standing outside the door. Chao Feng had been replaced from Xiangqing West. The first thing he did after being replaced was to rush to the emergency area to see Huami and the baby. At this time, Chao Feng was holding a camera in his hand. When Gong Yi came to open the door, Chao Feng's eyes were red, and he looked like he was about to cry. "Commander, I'm here. I failed to live up to your trust and didn't record the baby's birth." Gong Yi smiled and patted Chao Feng on the shoulder. "I've recorded it. I'll show you guys later. Feng, please come and see my son and daughter. They're so cute. I'm telling you, I think my daughter must be a genius. Look at how mature and sensible she looks when she smiles. Don't treat my daughter as an ordinary child." Balabalabala X10086. Gong Yi patted Chao Feng on the shoulder and led Chao Feng into the door of the ward. As soon as Chao Feng saw Huami, he apologized with a guilty look on his face. "Sister Hua, I failed to live up to your trust and came 2 days late. Please forgive me." Huami couldn't help but laugh. What's there to forgive or not forgive? Come and see the child. She also knew that Gong Yi's garrison regarded the 3 of them as their responsibility. So Chao Feng didn't catch Huami giving birth that day, and he felt bad. Chao Feng and Gong Yi were seen again, coming close to the Blu-ray boxes of the 2 children. Chao Feng lowered his head slightly. Gong Yi quickly stretched out his hand to support Chao Feng's forehead. His face was full of dissatisfaction, and he said to Chao Feng, "Just look, but don't get so close to my daughter. You are not allowed to kiss her." He knew his daughter was adorable, and everyone who saw her wanted to kiss her. But Gong Yi didn't allow it. He patted his son's blue light box and said to Chao Feng, "If you want to kiss, kiss my son. My son has thick skin and is very resistant to kissing." Seeing Gong Yi like this, Huami lay back on the bed and covered her head with the quilt. Okay, she is tired too. Let Gong Yi take care of his son and daughter. At this time, outside the East City base. At night, several people were walking in front of Chun-Hu's tent. Chun-Hu carried her mother out on his back. The man who met Chun-Hu outside the door whispered, "Boss, are we really going to leave here?" Chun-Hu nodded, his face heavy. There was no choice but to leave. The East City base was becoming untenable. He wondered if there was some plague spreading inside the East City base. If he didn't leave, Chun-Hu was worried that he and his old mother would also be affected. You know, at this time, all cities except Xiangqing are short of doctors and medicine. If by any chance a plague breaks out in City E under this environment, it would be enough to destroy the entire city. The man waiting outside the tent was Chun-Hu's cousin. Their Qin family was originally considered a very large family in City A. But after the end of the world, less than 10 months later, the entire Qin family was like a collapsed building. It vanished in an instant. There was no one around Chen who could help him escape from East City, except his cousins. Now only a few of his cousins remain with him. Chen, who carried his old mother on his back, raised his hand and patted his cousin on the shoulder. He promised his cousin, "I won't stay like this forever. Don't worry, I will make a comeback one day. When the time comes, I will give you everything you want." My cousin nodded, tears of emotion flashing in his eyes. "Boss, don't worry, as long as we are here, you will not die before us." He also called Chun-Hu boss. After all, when Chun-Hu was in his prime, his cousins could never get into the core of Chun-Hu's power. Several people from the Qin family left the East City base in the dark night with bold words. The direction they were heading to is not another base, but Xiangqing. In Chen Hu's words, the most dangerous place is also the safest place. He and Chu Xing teamed up to cause such great damage to the Xiangqing base. Once Hua Mi and Gong Yi have recovered from this, they will definitely not let go of the East City base. What's more, the current situation of the East City base is really worrying. Staying in the East City base is a stupid act. As a result, Chen Hu left with his old mother on his back, and not long after, Hu Yanxiang discovered that Chen Hu had left. He quickly informed Chu Xing of the news. Chu Xing felt very unbalanced and cursed loudly upon hearing this. How could Chen Hu do such a thing? This is a betrayal of our alliance, and it is absolutely unforgivable. He knew at the beginning that Chen Hu was being hunted by Gong Yi, so he generously took Chen Hu in. He believed that Chen Hu was a very powerful person, and as long as Chen Hu was given a chance to make a comeback, Chen Hu would definitely give back to the Chu family with more and better benefits. Chen Hu also vowed in front of Chu Xing that as long as he could make a comeback, he would give the Chu family everything they wanted. What happened now? Chen Hu had completely forgotten his oath. He abandoned East City and left on his own. Hu Yanxiang was so angry when he saw Chu Xing. He pretended to step forward and advised, "Mr. Chu, I think we should just forget about this matter. Everyone has their own aspirations. Don't worry, I am a person from East City in life and a ghost from East City in death. I will never leave you." Chu Xing turned his head to look at Hu Yanxiang, who had a fawning look on his face. Of course he knew that Hu Yanxiang said these words to please him, but it was precisely because of Hu Yanxiang's humble flattery that it made Chen Hu, a person who betrayed the alliance, look even more hateful. Chu Xing would never allow betrayal, especially since he, under the instigation of Chen Hu, had spent so much effort and lost so many lives to attack Xiangqing. They all ended in failure. What's even more hateful is that if Chu Xing had not been instigated by Chen Hu, he and Xiangqing base would not be in such a life and death situation today. In fact, from the very beginning, Chu Xing took Chu Yimin to Xiangqing base to discuss the material cooperation plan with Xiangqing base. It was Chen who had been instigating Chu Xing to make some irrational decisions. This has led to the current embarrassing situation at the East City base and Xiangqing base. Now, in Chu Shiheng's mind, all the misfortunes he encountered were caused by Chen Hu. It's all Chen Hu's fault. In the tent, Chu Xing had a gloomy face. He ordered Hu Yanxiang, "There are not many people around Chen Hu now. You take your men to chase him. No matter whether he is dead or alive, you must bring back his body. I want to keep his body for use." He wanted to send Chen Hu's body to Hua Mi and Gong Yi. Chu Xing watched as the East City base was shrouded in plague, so of course he had to find a way. Chen Hu wanted to leave. How could Chu Xing let him go so easily? At this moment, there was no better way to surrender to Xiangqing without taking Chen Hu's body. Hu Yanxiang nodded immediately. He had fallen out of favor with Chu Xing recently. Because the city wall of the East City base was not repaired, Chu Xing was very dissatisfied with him and gradually stopped using Hu Yanxiang. Therefore, Hu Yanxiang urgently needs to achieve some results. He turned around and walked out of Chu Shiheng's tent, gathered the few remaining strong men under his command, and chased Chen Hu's car. Because of the strength of the Xiangqing base, the Xiangqing base has previously been committed to clearing obstacles on various highways. In addition, with the hard work of the East City base, the expressway between East City and Xiangqing was quickly cleared. Hu Yanxiang drove all the way to the Xiangqing base, but he did not notice anything unusual on the road. I don't really understand why so many people turned into skeletons in the depression of East City base. If I have to give an explanation, it's probably because a lot of zombies died outside East City base. This is the mainstream theory of East City base. Besides, if there was anything wrong on the road leading to Xiangqing, it might have been discovered by the people at the Xiangqing base long ago. The man who was driving the car for Hu Yanxiang whispered to him after driving for a while, "Brother Xiang, are we really going to Xiangqing base? Think about the situation of Xiangqing base now. There are zombies everywhere outside. I guess Chun, who went to the Xiangqing base and was buried among the zombies. Hu Yanxiang thought about it and felt that what this person said made sense. Now the Xiangqing base has been completely surrounded by a tide of zombies. If they go any further, they will encounter zombies. Chun, who did not bring many people to the Xiangqing base, including his dead old mother, there were only 5 people at most. How could those 5 people possibly defeat so many zombies? So Hu Yanxiang ordered the man driving the car, drive forward for another half an hour. After half an hour, we will not go forward. You all should keep your mouths shut. If Chu Xiang asks, just say that we pushed Chun Hu into the zombie tide and that Chun Hu was eaten by the zombies beyond recognition. Do you understand? Everyone nodded and drove towards the Xiangqing base for half an hour. They decisively returned home. On the way back to the E-City base, several people found a corpse with a similar body shape to Chun Hu, tied the corpse to the roof of the car, and rushed back to the E-City base. In today's world, corpses can be seen everywhere, and it is not an exaggeration. People who have never left the Xiangqing base don't understand what kind of Hades this is. There were so many corpses that when driving on the road, you would see a disfigured corpse every few meters. What Chu Xiang said was not a lie. Although the situation in the E-City base was so bad, compared with other places, the E-City base was still considered to be very safe, convenient, and well-equipped. At least in the E-City base, there are still so many people alive. If you are lucky, you can find a lot of supplies among the rubble inside and outside the E-City base. Hu Yanxiang and his men are really bold. In this way, they dragged the corpse, which was similar in shape to Chun Hu, in front of Chu Xiang. Chu Xiang looked at the corpse with disgust, as half of its face had been bitten off. He glanced at it casually, waved his hand, and said to Hu Yanxiang, "Send this body to the Xiangqing base. Just tell Huami at the Xiangqing base that we in E-City are very sincere and want to reconcile with Xiangqing. It was all Chun Hu's fault before. If it weren't for Chun Hu instigating me behind my back, I wouldn't have done such irrational things. You must remember that your attitude must be good. After all, you represent me." Chu Xiang added, "Whether our E-City base can have sufficient food, medical supplies, and water depends entirely on whether we can please this witch named Hua." Chu Xiang was very upset about what he said. Of course he hated Huami very much, but now he had to please her. The situation at the E-City base is really too bad. Every day, large numbers of people defecate and urinate everywhere because of diarrhea. That's real death. Chu Xiang had never seen a survivor bleeding so much. They will appear skinny due to blood loss. Not only had Chu Xiang never seen such a scene before, but no one in his family had ever seen it either. But because he is a person with special abilities, he can hold on, but more and more people in the E-City base can't hold on. He suddenly had a very sad sense of fatalism, a feeling he couldn't tell anyone. In this state of mind, the uncles and aunts of the Chu family put a lot of pressure on him. If Chu Xiang cannot solve the dilemma of the E-City base well, then the Chu family will say it. They donated supplies to the Xiangqing base and moved the Chu family to the Xiangqing base, but did not leave the supplies to Chu Xiang. This represents Chu Shiheng's complete failure. He has lost his base and his status. Chu Xiang was unwilling to admit defeat so easily. He had to lower his proud head, present Chun Hu's body to Huami, and take the initiative to seek peace. As a result, Hu Yanxiang cursed secretly, but he had to drag Chun Hu's body and drive to Xiangqing base. However, they all agreed not to approach the Xiangqing base. While on the way, they called someone they knew in the Xiangqing base. They reported to Qin Jin their sincerity in wanting to offer Chun Hu's body. They couldn't contact Huami directly because not everyone knew Huami's cell phone number. If you want to show E-City's sincerity, you must first pass Qin Jin's test. The so-called sincerity is to directly tell the people in Xiangqing that they have sent Chun Hu's body and beg for forgiveness. And then, nothing. After Hu Yanxiang hung up the phone, someone in the car whispered, "Actually, since we have already come out of the E-City base, why do we have to go back to the E-City base? The E-City base is in this situation now. Who knows what will happen in the future?" Another man said with sorrow, "But if we don't go back to the E-City base, what can we do? Look outside the Xiang City base. It's full of zombies." Even if we fight to the death and fight our way to the edge of Xiangqing Base will not accept us. It's not that no one has ever fought their way into a zombie horde, and it's not that no one has ever overcome numerous difficulties and obstacles to reach the Xiangqing Base. But the Xiangqing Base is now completely closed and no one is allowed to enter the Xiangqing Base. It's true. They reached the gate of Xiangqing Base, but couldn't open the door, even when they shouted. No one can tell when the Xiangqing Base will reopen. So the survivors are leaving, aren't they? Seeing that Xiangqing Base is holding up, are they coming back? No way. The men in the car were silent, and they all looked at Hu Yanxiang, hoping that Hu Yanxiang could give them some advice. Hu Yanxiang pondered for a moment and said to everyone, "Let me tell you the truth. The Chu family actually still has a lot of supplies. How else could the Chu family provide such a large e-city base with steamed buns for so many survivors every day? If we don't go to Xiangqing Base now and go to any other city or small base, our life may not be as good as that in e-city base. After all, Chu Xiang is a fire-type mutant. If there are any monsters in this base and they come to Chu Xiang, he can burn them to ashes. My opinion is that whether Xiangqing forgives Acheng or not, and whether Huami forgives Chu Xiang or not, is none of our business. There is no need for us to put ourselves in danger in order to seek Xiangqing's forgiveness. We will just tell Chu Xiang that Chen who has been sent to the outside of Xiangqing Base, but Xiangqing Base is closed. That's not true either. And we can take advantage of this time to go find Miss Chu. Thanks to the existence of the Universal Signal Communicator, even all the signal base stations in this doomsday have been destroyed. As long as they have this universal signal connector and their mobile phones have power, they can still make calls smoothly. Therefore, Hu Yanxiang had already known from Chu Xiang that although Chu Yimin did not successfully reach the north of Xiangqing Base, he had successfully escaped from danger in the zombie tide. Currently, she is staying in a small gathering place for survivors outside City F. She couldn't move because all the bodyguards protecting her were killed by the zombie tide outside Xiangqing. Hu Yanxiang told the three men in the car, "We volunteered with Chu Xiang. After we delivered Chen Hu's body, we were beaten and scolded by Xiangqing. We had no choice but to pick up Miss Chu. Hu Yanxiang has always wanted to be Chu Shiheng's brother-in-law. Now this is the opportunity God has given him. In such a difficult world, he would appear in front of Chu Yimin like a hero descending from the sky. Wouldn't Chu Yimin devote all her love to him?" Hu Yanxiang had a good plan. This time, when he came out of the East City base, he made two great achievements, one of which was killing Chen Hu.
One savait que Yima.
What a great achievement these two have made. Let's see how Chu Xiang will value him in the future. Isn't it easy for him to capture the second in command of the city base? The men in the car all laughed obscenely. They all understood what Hu Yanxiang meant. Of course, everyone is just trying to get by. If they follow Hu Yanxiang and if Hu Yanxiang can get Chu Shiheng's attention, their future life will not be bad. Under the premise that they could clearly not enter the Xiangqing Base, the E-City Base with sufficient supplies was of course their only choice. A group of people drove directly from the outskirts of Xiangqing Base all the way to F-City. At this time, Huami was lying on the hospital bed resting, and in her ears she could hear all kinds of sounds coming from outside the door. It was as if, without all the discomforts of pregnancy, her body was no longer suppressed and she became exceptionally alert and clear-headed. Huami gradually figured it out with her poor memory that it was most likely her supernatural powers that changed her physique. In fact, at the end of her previous life, after her supernatural powers developed to a certain level, she also had such sharp ears and eyes. But because she died too quickly, she didn't have the luxury of being able to hear and see clearly for too long. Now, she was halfway through her confinement period, and Gong Yi temporarily returned to the north of Xiangqing Base. His mental power could not last long, so he had to go back to the north of Xiangqing Base every day to consolidate the cloud wall that was created by his mental power. It was at this time that Qingjun hurried into Huami's ward. She told Huami what she had heard, and then said, "This Chu Xiang is really a ruthless person. He just killed Chen Hu like that. These two are partners after all." Then Qingjun shook his head exaggeratedly and said with emotion, "In fact, I didn't expect that Chen Hu had done so many evil things in the past, would die so miserably. I heard his whole face was chewed off. Huami was holding her youngest son and feeding him. Hearing Qingjin say this, she couldn't help but laugh. How do you know that the body sent over from the East City base is really Chen Hu's? Could someone like Chen Hu really be killed so easily by Chu Xing? I don't believe it. Huami certainly didn't believe it. At least the experience she had in her previous life told her that Chen Hu lived a much more superior life than Chu Xing. She did not see with her own eyes how Chen Hu died, and Huami would never believe that Chen Hu would die. Then I heard Qingjin say, "We don't care whether Chen Hu's death is real or fake." Chu Shiheng's intention is very simple. He offered the body of his partner Chen Hu in order to make peace with our Xiangqing base. Huami shook her head, put her son, who had been nursing and eating until he fell asleep, back into the blue light box and said, "Impossible. No matter what Chu Xing says now, I will never forgive him. Tell Chu Xing to give up this idea as soon as possible. Besides, do you think Chu Xing is seeking peace? Just send someone to make a phone call outside Xiangqing, saying that they have killed Chen Hu and want to offer Chen Hu's body. Where is Chen Hu's body? What's the point of just talking? Their people can't even get close to the periphery of our Xiangqing base, so what sincerity can we talk about?" Reply to Chu Xing, "Don't ask for peace or not. Hurry up and prepare for the battle. I will be out of confinement soon. Let Chu Xing clean up his mess and prepare to face my wrath." Seeing Huami rejected the olive branch thrown by Chu Xing so harshly and bluntly, Qingjin also nodded in agreement. She